Hello, I'm Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkin, speaking to you from my office in Seattle City Hall. On July 26, 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, was signed into law. This year, July 26, 2020, marks the 30th anniversary of this critically important civil rights law. On behalf of the City of Seattle, King County, the Northwest ADA Center, and so many wonderful sponsors and partners, we ask you to join us in celebrating the achievements that have resulted in a more inclusive, accessible, and diverse community. We recognize that we all must continue to work together to remove barriers, change perceptions, and create opportunities for people with disabilities across the United States. Let's celebrate and pledge to continue our efforts in the spirit of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Thank you for joining us in this programming and in this important work.
Hi, I'm King County Executive Dow Constantine. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the signing of the Americans with Disabilities Act, legislation that enshrined the civil rights of people with disabilities and established a clear national mandate for the elimination of discrimination against individuals with disabilities. The ADA has helped expand opportunities for Americans with disabilities by reducing barriers, changing perceptions, and increasing full participation in community life. It has helped to strengthen our society by striving to ensure that everyone, regardless of disability, has equal access to employment, transportation, housing, education, healthcare, recreation, cultural activities, and so much more. The fight for equity continues today. Barriers and discrimination persist. But the full promise of the ADA will only be reached if we remain committed to ensuring that individuals with disabilities have every opportunity to realize their full potential and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you for the honor of speaking with you today to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the passage of the Americans with Disabilities Act. My name is Karen Braitmayer. I'm an architect and accessibility consultant working for Studio Pacifica in Seattle. I'm a full-time wheelchair user. I'm also hard of hearing, wearing bilateral hearing aids for 20 years now, along with being a wife, a mom, a community volunteer, and an avid traveler. Although right now, I'm spending a lot of my time at home, like everyone else. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the passage of this groundbreaking civil rights law, the Americans with Disabilities Act, I want to reflect on the history and the context of the ADA, the law itself, and the impact it has had on my life and the lives of so many Americans. Approximately 40 million Americans have a disability. Disability can be acquired at birth, through injury, or through the natural aging process. Disability does not discriminate. It affects persons of every nationality, ethnicity, race, color, socioeconomic background, gender, and age. Webster's defines disability as a physical, mental, cognitive, or developmental condition that impairs, interferes with, or limits a person's ability to engage in certain tasks or actions or participate in typical daily activities and interactions. This makes sense, right? We think of disability as being unable to walk, to hear, to see, or to understand the same way as a so-called average person. There's no value judgment in that definition, so what's the big deal if you need to wear glasses to correct poor vision? However, a second definition of disability is a legal one. A disadvantage or handicap, especially one imposed or recognized by the law. Note the word disadvantage. Now that is a value judgment placed on the experience of not measuring up when compared to an average person. It was a long road in the evolution of the disability rights movement to the time when everyone recognized that the disadvantage that people with disabilities face wasn't due to the nature of their condition, but was due to persistent and pervasive discrimination against those who don't match society's expectations. Parents and family members, educators and social service advocates, along with people with disabilities themselves, began to coalesce around the realization that the barriers they faced to education, transportation, employment, etc., were structural in nature and were actually discriminatory. Now, it might surprise you, but it wouldn't have occurred to me or my family back in my early days to demand that I be able to ride on a school bus like other children. They were just thankful I was able to go to school. So my mom drove me to and from school every day. The first landmark public policy victory for the rights of people with disabilities was the passage of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. Section 504, modeled after civil rights laws which banned discrimination based on race, ethnic origin, and sex by entities receiving federal funding, such as schools. It banned discrimination on the basis of disability by those same entities. For the first time, this law declared that the exclusion and separation of people with disabilities was discriminatory. Previous to that, it was a preconceived societal belief that the problems faced by people with disabilities, such as unemployment or lack of education, were inevitable consequences of the physical or mental limitations imposed by the disability itself. Section 504 made plain that if the environment was built to remove barriers, and if societal fears and prejudices were removed, people with disabilities could fully participate. People with disabilities looked to the civil rights movement in the 1960s, working to obtain the same broad-reaching legislation that the 1964 Civil Rights Act achieved for Black Americans. A most poignant image captured by photographer Tom Olin at an ADAPT protest, fighting for accessible buses, captured a man with a sign hanging from the back of his wheelchair reading, "Can't even get on the bus." This photo was an example of people with disabilities saying, "Hey, what about us?" Throughout the U.S. in the 1970s, disability rights advocates began to gather and organize, taking on issues and chipping away at the barriers that they faced. In the early 1970s in Berkeley, California, the independent living movement was founded by Ed Roberts. A polio survivor, he demonstrated that people with disabilities could live independently and on their own terms in their chosen community. Ed and others advocated for housing that enabled people with disabilities to live independently, making their own decisions about how to live, work, and engage with their community. These advocates were reacting to what is known as the medical model of disability, because at the time, adults with disabilities were expected to be housed in nursing homes or assisted living facilities managed by doctors or parents. People with disabilities demanded and successfully achieved the right to manage their living situations, hire and train their own caregivers, and to live within their chosen communities in traditional housing arrangements rather than in a medical setting. In 1988, the advocacy and protests by students at Gallaudet University, the only American university specifically for deaf students, once again illustrated for the university and the country the power of advocacy for inclusion by people with disabilities. The Deaf President Now movement led to the appointment of Dr. I. King Jordan, the first deaf president of Gallaudet. During the 1980s, there were many other organized advocacy movements around the country focusing on independence and inclusion for all people with disabilities, including people who are blind, low vision, deafblind, people with intellectual disabilities, and more. In the 1990s, protesters with disabilities and their allies gathered at the U.S. Capitol. They were advocating for the passage of the ADA. To mark the passion and importance of their message, many protesters left their mobility aids at the bottom of the Capitol steps and crawled to the top. This became known as the Capitol Crawl, and images of it were shown throughout the country in newspapers and television. This was a visceral and very effective demonstration, clearly showing the barriers that people with mobility disabilities face every day. The ADA was finally signed into law by President George H.W. Bush on July 26, 1990. This legislation was designed to prevent discrimination against people with disabilities in 5 key areas: employment, programs and services by city and state governments, public accommodations, transportation, and telecommunications. The ADA was far-reaching in impacting the barriers that people with disabilities face every day. Because the ADA mandates that programs and services also be accessible by people with disabilities, alternate formats such as Braille, interpreting, and other forms of communication must be in place so that people with disabilities can access the program or service of their choosing. I'd like to highlight the ADA's impact on the built environment. As you recall, in 1973, Section 504 of the Rehab Act required accessibility in newly constructed buildings owned, leased, and funded by the federal government. By the late 1980s, a small group of states had accessibility regulations in their building codes. Washington State was among those, and ours was so robust that once the ADA passed, our state accessibility code was the first to be certified as equivalent to the ADA. Yay, Washington! If you lived in a state with no accessibility regulations in the building code, though, very little of what was being built was accessible. Once the ADA went into effect, all new construction or alterations of public accommodations and state and local facilities were now required to be accessible. That means the new daycare, grocery store, movie theater, sports stadium, library, school, community center, doctor's office, hospital, hair salon, all the places you might want to visit on a regular basis must comply with accessibility regulations. However, the ADA doesn't just impact new construction or remodels like a building code. The most impactful and the most controversial component of the ADA was and still is the barrier removal requirement. Owners of existing buildings that are not undergoing a change must still assess their buildings for barriers to people with disabilities, make a plan to remove identified barriers, and start chipping away at removing those barriers. This is the part of the law that envisioned making slow but steady improvements to our existing building stock and making marked change in our communities. Regrettably, at the 30-year mark, you would think we have few barriers left that need to be removed, but this far-reaching impact has yet to be realized. So what does this mean to those of us living with disabilities? How does this affect my life and that of my family? When I was growing up, our towns and cities were very different than today. No curb ramps, no accessible parking spaces, no restrooms with wheelchair-accessible stalls. I was trained to visit the restroom before I left the house because you never know if you can go while you're out. I tried to teach my daughter the same thing, but it never stuck because everywhere we go, she can always find a toilet room she can use now. I attended an elementary school with 2 floors and no elevator. My mom carried me upstairs and down every day in my 4th through 6th grade. I was of the mindset that I was just lucky to be going to school. Many of my peers weren't in school or were sent to a special school for disabled kids. I certainly grew up with the model of disability as my problem to solve, not as an issue of discrimination. Today, I'm appreciative of the things I can count on in Seattle. Curb ramps are available. A moderately usable bathroom is available at the restaurant I go to. The movie theater has a space for wheelchair riding patrons. Is everything perfect? Is there more to go? Do I see failures in compliance? Well, regrettably, yes. In the 30 years since the passage of the ADA, a whole generation of young people have experienced the benefits of the ADA. My daughter is an example. Raised in urban Seattle of the 2000s, she expects and demands more compliance. What I am grateful for, she knows is her right. One area she continues to demand improvement on is equity in programs and services that reflect the actual users. As an example, at her university, the Student Activities Center would post flyers for fun events, such as a trip to the pumpkin patch in the fall. If a student with a disability wanted to attend and needed an accommodation, they would need to register 2 weeks in advance. My daughter pointed out to me, what college student planned their weekends 2 weeks in advance? Everyone who didn't need an accommodation could spontaneously decide to attend, but not so for students with disabilities. Is this inclusive and equitable? I became an architect because I love the process of making things. And along the way, I realized that the way we make things can create or remove barriers for an accessible experience. Architects have the power to include or exclude, even inadvertently. Take a local theater specializing in family-friendly shows. They have wheelchair spaces in their auditorium, 1 seat on each side. This is a compliant number given the small size of the auditorium. For a family such as mine with 2 wheelchair users, it was not accessible. What parent would sit on the opposite side of the auditorium from their 5-year-old? So taking into consideration the way the space will be used may impact the actual method of making something accessible. Architectural barriers are said to be a mismatch between the environment and the user. If we can align the environment with the needs of more users, all users, then wouldn't we be creating a more inclusive and just world? The ADA sets the minimum bar for what that environment should consist of in order to be accessible. The ADA provides guidance for designers and architects to implement features and elements that are useful and necessary. Let's face it, many of the novel ideas that became commonplace due to ADA legislation, features like curb ramps, push buttons to open doors, lever door hardware, voice activation for computers and smartphones, these are features we all use every day. As a wheelchair user, I laugh at how many times I stand in line behind people with wheeled suitcases, bikes, and rolling carts at the curb ramp on the street corner. So many technologies developed for people with disabilities, such as texting, which supports the deaf community, for example, have been woven into the fabric of our society today. In 2010, there was a significant update to the ADA. 10 years later, I believe the time is now right for another update, including more solutions to barriers that still exist today. I am hopeful that the disability community, along with advocates, allies, and professionals, will effectively meet the ongoing challenges of addressing the rapidly changing field of technology in transportation, computing, and communication. There is still a ways to go. We must continue to fine-tune what accessibility means in the built environment, addressing and coordinating with increasingly complex area of wheeled mobility devices, and we must continue working together, demanding that we be treated fairly and equally as the citizens we are, as well as demanding the right to utilize the talent, skills, wisdom, ingenuity, and much more that we bring and contribute to our communities. There are still deeply rooted attitudinal barriers to be dismantled and transformed. Employment of people with disabilities is still far too low, hampered by lowered expectations and fears of how to incorporate people into workplaces. 70% of adults with disabilities are unemployed. This has got to change. Increasing employment of people with disabilities allows those wage earners to support the economy by paying taxes, visiting places of public accommodation to shop, dine, travel, and have fun. All of those opportunities bring the aspirational goals of the ADA to the forefront, that people with disabilities must be able to join their friends and family and peers and coworkers in their participation in society. Transportation technology is moving rapidly, and there is not enough focus on designing new forms of transportation with and for people with disabilities. It is also imperative that accessibility be integral to the technologies of websites, appliances, smartphones, computing, electronics, and gaming, to name a few. So how will we positively shift this old and obstructive paradigm? As we evolve and grow, we simply must recognize and embrace that disability is woven into the human fabric, just a part of being human. At any time, an event could occur to alter the way you interact with the built environment. So, include disability within other social justice initiatives. Include more qualified people with disabilities on your boards and commissions. Hire more people with disabilities to teach in your universities. Elect more people with disabilities for public office. We want people with disabilities in leadership positions. The ways to raise the bar for all humans are myriad. As we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the ADA, let us take a far-reaching look at our future and create places and conditions such that all have the opportunity to succeed and live to their full potential. The story of the ADA is truly a story of advocacy and leadership. Disability rights are civil rights. So many of our leaders are the sort of people who ask the piercing question, why is this happening? Is this right and fair? And if not, how can I change that? I'd like to recognize some of Washington State's leaders in the disability rights movement who were active at the time of the passage of the ADA. Toby Olson, Barbara Allen, Sue Amater, Paul Wysocki, Lonnie Davis, Della Schaefer, Jean Tews, Bob Thurston, Brian Lynn, Carolyn Blair Brown, Paul Zajdzek, Joy Culp, Carol Mayer, Don Kay, Don Mansfield. We must be telling our children the stories of these heroes and the many more ordinary citizens who stood up for the rights of themselves and others. In conclusion, for today, I give you a 4-part call to action. I call for business owners to take another look at their establishment and make this year the year you upgrade your parking lot or store entry door or service counter and be sure that they are compliant and welcoming to people with disabilities. I call to employers to seek out qualified job applicants with disabilities. Make this the year we lower the unemployment rate for people with disabilities. I call for architects and designers to engage people with disabilities with lived experience in your design projects. It will benefit the compliance and the quality of your designs. And lastly, I call to people with disabilities and their allies to step up and speak up. Run for public office, apply for a community board, and if you run into an architectural barrier, ask for that barrier to be removed. Face it, making things accessible isn't just about being nice to those people, but because you or someone you love will need it in the future. It's in everyone's interest to make the world accessible. Now, let's all toast the 30th anniversary and thank the heroes who understood the need for legal action for the civil rights of people with disabilities. Thank you.
A blessing all my own. Awaken from dreams to this form of mind, blood and sinew, bone and sweat, this word, mine, 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 edge of dark mountain, echo of sassafras.
Behold this frail body. Watch as I stumble, stutter, flail, roll, and crawl, and know the world in my way.
Mineral trace of relief surface, the way things appear separate, yet retain of the same.
Racing thoughts have wrested peace from my waking hours, these impulses towards self-destruction and life erasure. Know of them, how my life has changed through them. Listen to abuse hurled with vicious glee. Broken object, worthless idiot, insane lunatic.
See the onerous journey over deserts, barren dunes, sulphurous craters across dark forests, through aching limbs and a troubled mind, from sense to sense, from beginning to end, like an unfolding forest fern frond releasing spores that tell of ancient seabeds. I rejoice in these gifts of mine.
How I clambered my way to beauty, to the immovable source, despite callous, scornful cries. See how from insults and oblivion, I've made madness a blessing all my own, and witnessed glory.
A Blessing All My Own, written and performed by Claudia Castro Luna and Angela Lemus-Mogrovejo, produced by Rooted in Rights.
The following film features audio description. Listen for this voice for a description of important visuals and titles that appear in the film. Animated Rooted in Rights logo. A tree grows out of the word rooted, as roots grow in the word rights, with the slogan, "Disability rights are human rights" beneath it. Chapter 1, Excellent Worker. The skyline of Rochester, New York. Minimum wage, $9.70 per hour.
My name is Melanie Oyer, and I work for the Center for Disability Rights. I met Gloria about 2 years ago. She is one of my clients.
A photo of Melanie and Gloria together smiling.
She works at a site for people with disabilities, sorting items, working with little objects, putting plastic parts together.
Gloria Marrero uses sign language.
I worked there for 8 years.
Her work always talks about how great an employee she is. She's reliable, she's friendly, she's always on time, she never misses work.
Yeah, they tell me I'm a good worker. My boss loves me.
They have specific categories that they evaluate her on, and the best is 4 out of 4. And she received a 4 out of 4 on about 20 different categories.
Gloria's work records.
In one category, it says independent work rate, and it says excellent worker. On average, makes $3.50 an hour. Gloria is the only excellent worker that I know that makes $3.50 an hour.
No, it's not fair.
In my opinion, the only reason why an employer would pay somebody so low that's an excellent worker is because it's legal.
Rooted in Rights presents film footage of factory workers from the 1930s. NBC News announcer.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
President Franklin Roosevelt.
My friends.
Families gather around the radios to listen.
After many requests on my part, the Congress passed a Fair Labor Standards Act. That act sets a floor below wages.
I'm Mark Riccobono, President of the National Federation of the Blind. The Fair Labor Standards Act is a civil rights statute, and it provides protections to Americans in the workforce. The minimum wage guarantee was revolutionary. If you are going to take a job, you know what the floor is.
It is the most far-sighted program for the benefit of workers that has ever been adopted, here or in any other country.
But the minimum wage is offered to everybody, except for people with disabilities.
I'm Cheryl Bates Harris. I'm Senior Disability Advocacy Specialist with the National Disability Rights Network. Under the Fair Labor Standard Act, which was passed in 1938, there's a section of law called Section 14C.
14C certificates.
Employers who have a 14C certificate pay people with disabilities less than the minimum wage simply based on the fact that they have a disability. So sub-minimum wage is a term we sometimes use to describe paying people with disabilities a different wage from everybody else.
It's intended to be able to give employers the opportunity to hire wounded veterans returning from war. That provision of law was little known and little utilized until sheltered workshops began to flourish in the 50s and the 60s. Sheltered workshop is a congregate facility where people with disabilities go for a period of time during the day. It's very boring. It's shredding newspapers. It's counting nuts, bolts, and screws for packaging. They started for the right reason. 50, 60 years ago because parents were keeping their children out of institutions and needed somewhere for them to go during the day. But they've since become an outdated model of segregation.
2016, 241,265 people with disabilities are paid less than the minimum wage.
Statistics show that people with disabilities are at least twice as likely to live below the poverty line. And poverty, I do not believe, is the American dream that we have for our sons and our daughters or our family members, with or without a disability.
Bottom dollars. Chapter 2, Even When You Hustle. A river runs through the small town of Tiffin, Ohio. Minimum wage, $8.15 per hour.
My name's Pamela Seward. I like to sew, like to walk, like to go shopping and out to eat.
Pamela sewing.
I embroider pillowcases and pass them out to friends and family members.
She holds up an embroidered pillow.
I have a learning disability as to math, reading, spelling. I work at Seneca Rehab. I work there full-time. I've been there for 6 years.
Barbara's service dog next to her at a conference table.
My name is Barbara Corner. I'm an attorney, and I'm also the employment team leader here at Disability Rights Ohio. The Seneca Rehab is a sheltered workshop. It basically has one major contract with Ropey, a multi-million-dollar corporation that provides flooring, tile and flooring, more or less for commercial establishments. And so they contract with Seneca County and with this workshop to provide the tile samples.
We sort them, make sure the print's coming out all right. Then if the print's not coming out all right, we'll throw them away. And if the print's coming out all right, we'll go ahead and chain them.
There are other jobs at the workshop, like for instance, Pam has done the saw where she has used a machine to cut holes. And there's an auto print which is another machine that prints a pattern on the tiles. So it is, in a lot of ways, light industry.
I was probably only getting about $3-something an hour.
Way below what the wages were for people in light industries, which could be up to $11 to $13 an hour.
I don't feel that it's right if one person gets paid better than another. I feel like we should all be paid same.
Cheryl.
Section 14C allows employers to pay individuals based on their productivity.
Mark.
The idea is to compare the productivity of a person with a disability to a non-disabled person.
The graphic illustrates time studies.
Let's say that we were a widget manufacturer and they test 3 individuals without disabilities and they can make 9 widgets an hour, 10 widgets an hour, and 11 widgets an hour. Then the expectation would be that the norm would be the average of 10 widgets an hour. A person with a disability trying to make widgets and he only makes 5 widgets in an hour. He would therefore be paid 50% of the prevailing wage since he was only producing 50% of the work. But if a non-disabled worker also only made 5 widgets an hour, he would still be paid 100% of the wage because he benefits from the minimum wage protections.
What happens is people with disabilities are held to a productivity standard while everybody else is guaranteed a wage regardless of how productive they are or not. So basically every person with a disability has to hustle or you're out of luck, and even when you hustle, you're not guaranteed the minimum that everybody else gets.
Pamela embroiders a pillowcase. Barbara.
When they tested our clients, they didn't use the exact same testing conditions as for people without disabilities, so that test wasn't fair.
I got held up by people slowing me down on the other side. I had to wait for them to bring jigs over to me so I could actually put the pieces on the jigs. Sometimes they'd saw around, not bring the jigs over so the job could be done. I was relying on other people, and I don't feel that I was tested right.
The Department of Labor has responsibility for monitoring the 14C certificates, but there are a lot of them out there. There are a lot of people with disabilities, and there's a limited amount of capacity at the Department of Labor to monitor. So it's the employers are expected to fill out the papers and expected to do it correctly and expected to tell the truth.
From what we found out, the Department of Labor basically just looks at the paper certificate and doesn't do any further investigation. That's why things have just continued the same way they've been for decades.
Pamela cleans her apartment as her cat watches.
When I'm working, I feel that I should be paid as an equal person.
Chapter 3, Pennies Per Hour. Row houses line the street of Baltimore, Maryland. Minimum wage, $8.75 per hour.
There's no reason to pay us less than the minimum wage. Yeah, I'm Charles Beebo. I'm from Baltimore, Maryland.
Charles leaves his house using his white cane.
I went to the School for the Blind all through high school. I was very enthused about working. I wanted to work. And it certainly wasn't what I hoped it would have been. They wanted to throw me in a workshop, a children's workshop, and forget about me. And that's what they basically did.
Cheryl.
I think they persist for a number of reasons. Number one, they're well-funded. There's a pre-vocational service under Medicaid that basically pays for people to go somewhere for 7-8 hours a day. The provider agency is being paid for their mere presence in the workshop, usually on a daily basis. Now, there is a program called Ability One. Because the federal government is the largest purchaser of goods and services, this program gives preferential contracts to organizations that employ people with significant disabilities. So these service providers can basically be guaranteed a lifelong contract.
Mark.
So you get all these government programs that really create a great incentive for employers with the theory that they're there to help people with disabilities, but when you add them all up, they simply serve to shelter people with disabilities and to keep them limited in what they can do.
As the providers have gotten more sophisticated and actually say that they want to teach people job skills, they look to businesses in the community to provide work to them.
And of course, you can pay people with disabilities less than the minimum wage, so you have a built-in competitive advantage to the price of the workforce that you provide.
Charles.
They had contracts like that. Of course, the workshop would bid on different items, and of course, the workshop would say they'll do it for this price, and Western Electric would say, okay, we'll give you the work then since you're the lowest bidder.
The companies, we believe, are getting a very good deal.
Companies that work with agencies that hold 14C certificates. Vons, Boeing, the Home Depot, the Medicine Shop, Merriam-Webster, Walgreens, 3M, Best Western, Pizza Hut.
The workshop is getting a lot of money, paying on average under $2 an hour across the country.
Roy Roca, Bakersfield, California.
And they go, okay, let's see how fast you can take a phone apart. I start taking phones apart real quick, and they go, oh man, you do it pretty quick and all this stuff. And I said, man, I'm never miss no days, and I'm gonna see what my first paycheck is.
James Meadors, San Antonio, Texas.
When I was in Oklahoma, I was there a short time in my high school, and they said, we got a job for you. It's a cool job. And when I saw my first paycheck, I said, that's not right.
And then 2 weeks came, they were passing out payroll at the program. And I opened, I go, $15? And I took it to the supervisor, I go, well, I didn't miss no days. Look at my check, it's only $15.
It's only $7.70. And then I look at the rate, they said it's 50 cents an hour. I said, oh my God.
Betty Williams, Indianapolis.
How would you like to go into a children's workshop and work for 2 weeks and come out with a $6 check? That happened to me more than once.
A vintage film of Goodwill Industries showing workers in their workshop.
It's spring, and again the rush is on for the Goodwill Industries. Let's leave the customers for a moment while we inspect the operation of this splendid social service agency.
Charles.
When I used to work at Goodwill, that was the same thing kind of a deal. Some people would make maybe $10, $15, $20 a week.
Mark.
Well, Goodwill is one of the largest employers, and I would say exploiters, of the provisions under the law that permit people with disabilities to pay paid less than the minimum wage.
The Center for Disability Rights. Stephanie works at her desk, seated in her wheelchair.
I'm Stephanie Woodward. I'm the Director of Advocacy at the Center for Disability Rights in Rochester, New York. So we just did a FOIL request from Goodwill. We did a Goodwill nationally for all of their wages.
Goodwill hourly wages. Grand Island, Nebraska, $2.53. Birmingham, Alabama, $1.51. Branford, Connecticut, 40 cents. Cincinnati, Ohio, 2 cents.
We found that can be as low as 2 cents an hour.
2 cents?
2 cents.
The management is making very, very significant six-figure salaries, and they say then that they can't afford to pay people with disabilities a minimum wage.
Provider agencies have told us that if they had to pay half of minimum wage, that they would probably go bankrupt.
CEO annual salaries. Opportunity Partners, Inc., $198,693. CW Resources, $293,764. Ohio Valley Goodwill, $342,069. Goodwill Industries of Orange County, $352,338. Pride Industries, Inc., $361,578. Elwyn, $400,065. Goodwill National, $565,925. Photo of Jim Gibbons, CEO of Goodwill.
Quite ironic that the CEO of Goodwill, who is a blind person, thinks that other people with disabilities don't deserve a basic level of equality. And I don't know how you resolve that in your own mind as a person with a disability, except that you don't believe in the concept of equality and civil rights.
These places had a vested interest in keeping people there, especially those who could produce.
Charles walks into a convenience store.
You may say, well, why didn't you quit? Well, there was nowhere else to go. Western Electric never thought about hiring people like myself to do it, and I would have done very well at it. But they would have had to pay me like everybody else, and they didn't want to do that.
Charles buys a lottery ticket.
I'm poor now, and I got to carry that to my grave.
Charles holds up his Mega Millions ticket.
If I win, wouldn't that be nice? I spent years doing this stuff in the sheltered workshops, but it really didn't prepare me for anything. They lied to us and said that it would. I was basically sold a bill of goods.
Chapter 4, Been Down There Too Long. A trailer home in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Minimum wage, $7.25 per hour.
My name's Timmy Mitchell, and I live in Vicksburg, Mississippi with my mom and my little brother.
Dorothy holds up a family photo.
My name is Dorothy Mitchell. Tim is my son. Grew up, be a nice kid, graduated and everything from high school. I know it was after graduation, about a couple of months later, they signed him up for Midwest, and they started him out there.
A 14C certificate for Midwest.
My name is Joan Farish. I work at Midwest Industries. It is a sheltered workshop. Participants are actually able to come on site every day, and they work. We recycle paper and plastics.
I say, well, that's nice. He'll be able to get out the house, won't have to stay around the house all the time. He'll find something to do with himself.
It's okay.
Why is it only okay?
Tillman closes his eyes and looks down.
It's okay.
Title, School Transition Plan, Cheryl.
Schools are supposed to develop a transition plan for individuals with disabilities so that when they exit the school system, they either go to work or some other appropriate post-school activities. We know from our work doing sheltered workshop monitoring around the country that most of these individuals go directly from the school system to the sheltered workshop.
Mark.
As soon as they get ready to graduate, we give them an opportunity through the transition programs to go tour the sheltered workshop and say, look at this is great.
Stephanie.
You'll see the richer high schools have so many more resources, and then the poorer areas, what do? Oh, sheltered workshop.
So their thinking is that if they go to the sheltered workshop, they will get the services and supports that they need there to move into post-school activities. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. What they end up with is a sub-minimum wage job in a segregated setting without the opportunity to talk about real work.
Jackson, Mississippi.
My name is Lorraine Jackson. When I was in the shelter workshop, they had me bending over, putting clothes in the barrel. I had CP, so I couldn't bend over and then get myself back up. It took me a while to get myself back up. I had to ask somebody to get me up so I can reposition myself and then pick up some clothing and then bend back down to put it in the barrel. That's real demeaning. When they matched me up with the workshop, it was supposed to be just for a limited time. But as you can see, some people get stuck.
Looking at the reality, you will find someone in a sheltered workshop today who's been in that same sheltered workshop for years. So if this is a job training program, I'm not sure how long it takes to train someone, but I think it's a bit excessive.
Tillman's trailer home.
I worked at Midwest 15 years. The first job I had, and I've been down there too long.
Dorothy.
So they say it's gonna find him a job, and they did it.
When did they say they were going to find him a job?
They started last year looking for him one.
I went for my interview. They told me I got a job, and then I liked it. I clean up, sweep, back in the floor, and then wipe out the veneer, pour the trash. And I love it because I like to work out in the community, make good friends, new people, get paid more money, $7.25 an hour. Help my family and them out.
Tillman vacuuming the floor at a hotel. Timeline shows Tillman's training in a sheltered workshop, leading to a part-time job after 15 years. Off-screen interviewer.
So why did it take 15 years for Tillman?
Dorothy.
I have no idea.
Tillman takes out the hotel's trash.
Wish they would have started training him in school to do things like this, how to go out and get a job on your own. Probably could have got one right after.
Tillman wipes down the soda machine.
We've set up a pipeline to sheltered employment that starts at a very young age, where we start working with children with disabilities and telling them how limited they are.
Well, there's a ton of alternatives. We could start with a transition plan that, with teachers and parents all getting together and understanding that this person has more value than 25 cents.
A two-story house in Southampton, New Hampshire. Minimum wage, $7.25. Sarah Frost.
I am Sarah. I am 23 years old, almost 24.
Sarah commutes to work by train early in the morning.
I'm in the shipping and receiving at the Boston Children's Hospital. When we first get there, we will have our meetings. Then we'll start delivering all the packages, all 13 floors.
Sarah pulls a cart of boxes through the hallway in fast motion.
It's super busy all day. It is a tough job, but doing pretty awesome.
Sarah's house.
My name's Scott Frost.
And I'm Robin Frost. We are Sarah's parents, yep. We live in this little town on the seacoast of New Hampshire, which you could basically throw a rock and hit Massachusetts. Though Sarah was in this community, she wasn't part of it. She didn't have any friends. She was never picked for any team. She small school. Everyone would get off the bus to go to a birthday party, and she was still sitting on the school bus, and she got that. And granted, Sarah has more advantages. At the end of the day, she does have disabilities. I felt that she deserved more, and I could do better.
My name is Tanya Hart Newkirk, and I am the PDMS account manager for One Sky, and I also am a service coordinator. Sarah has some real goals ever since she was little. I think around age 9 or 10 is when she started talking, and one of the things she always talked about was really wanting to work at a hospital, specifically Children's in Boston. And we have a transition team here at One Sky that works with adults starting at age 14 until they turn 21. So that transition team and the high school had brought this program to Sarah and her family's attention, and they all had decided that that would be a good fit for Sarah.
One Sky Community Services did support her with what they called vocational training, more vocational training, and then still wanting just a little bit more, we sent her to the Institute of Community Inclusion at the University of Massachusetts in Boston, Mass. And there is where she did her internship at Children's and then was hired by Children's.
If I didn't have any access to those programs, I'll be just sitting at home doing nothing. And I don't like doing nothing all day.
Timeline showing Tillman's 15 years at a sheltered workshop. Below, a second timeline shows Sarah's internships, leading to a full-time job in only 5 years. A coworker slides a heavy box to Sarah.
Can I have a look?
Yes. I am super proud of my job because I love being at my job, getting me going. See you tomorrow.
Sarah wheels her cart out of a mailroom. Joan.
When our kids get out of school, a lot of them, where else do they have to go but to come to the workshop because they have an opportunity to learn, to be trained.
Tillman holds up a photo of himself at graduation. Laron.
When I was in the shelter workshop, they told me, well, this getting you ready for a job. I said, I'm already ready for a job.
Chapter 5. My mother didn't think I could do it. A green lawn in front of the Capitol building in Olympia, Washington. Minimum wage, $11 per hour. Hugh Bertolin walks down the street.
I'm Hugh Bertolin. I used to work at Morningside Shelter Workshop. I was making less than minimum wage.
And how long did you work at the shelter workshop?
About 15 years.
A sign reading, Morningside, everybody works, everybody wins.
My name is Jim Larson, and I'm the CEO of Morningside. Morningside has always been a very successful program and very innovative program. But I think while we say we focus on the individual early on in our history, or our history through sheltered employment, I'm not sure if that's true. A professor at the University of Oregon brought up his students, and they did a survey of all of our students in sheltered employment. So 80% of the people wanted to work in the community, and we have about 20% of the people indicated that maybe staying there or something else would have been better for them. First, you're kind of shocked saying, 80%? That's a lot. I'm sure more people would want to be here. But that's the only option they had. And I think that's the other thing with choice. So if you only have one choice, what are your options? What are your exposure to work? You don't have any exposure to work. So it seems to me that when you have that exposure and that choice, then there's other options than going to a shelter workshop.
Hugh waits to cross the street. Disability Rights, Washington sign.
My name is Susan Cass, and I'm a staff attorney at Disability Rights Washington. The whole concept of a shelter workshop was based on, a charitable notion and a notion of giving people opportunities that didn't otherwise exist. And so it has roots that run deep and have been around for several decades. The call to end subminimum wage and to end the practice of sheltered work is a call that almost universally is to transition and to phase out this practice.
Well, 2004 is a really exciting time here at Morningside is because we had a celebration on June 24th to close the shelter workshop, and we called it Bridge to Community Celebration. And so it was a culmination of really a 5-year plan to close the sheltered workshop. So of the 120 people in sheltered employment, we found spots for most everybody. Hugh Bertolin was one of our first people that got placed out of our shelter workshop program.
Hugh approaches an Albertson store.
I was hoping I could be like a courtesy clerk. And then I finally became a courtesy clerk at Albertsons. Morningside got it for me. I like bagging the groceries. I have some friends there who I see our customers, I see my fellow workers.
Hugh chats with his coworker.
I work Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday.
How long have you worked there?
19 years.
Hugh smiles while standing under the Albertson sign.
And there's probably 8 people or so that didn't make a transition. Of the 8, 6 people were referred to a community access program, and I think 2 people decided to retire. And of the 6 or so people that we found other options for, all the parents were upset at me.
Mark.
Parents of people with disabilities, I think, are the group that this subject is hardest for. I feel bad that we have not gotten to them earlier, that they have fought the notion that this model of, quote, work is really the thing that defines what the future can be like for their child.
Well, my mother didn't think I could do it, but I did.
Hugh bags groceries.
Having somebody sit all day, put together a nut and a bolt, isn't necessarily a positive thing, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, I think oftentimes that had a more detrimental effect on a client than it had a positive effect. Because oftentimes those people didn't want to be there, and they knew it wasn't real work, they weren't getting paid for it or paid appropriately for it, and it caused a lot of issues.
The desert landscape in Gallup, New Mexico. Minimum wage, $7.50 per hour.
My name is Dexter Smith. I listen to old country music.
Dexter browses music.
Sometimes I don't go to rodeo.
That's all I do.
I used to be working on a workshop, like button, janitorial.
Dexter walks through a dry yard, downtown Gallup.
My name is Yolanda Sandoval-Nez, and I'm a senior advocate with the Native American Disability Law Center. For Navajo especially, is that families aren't well familiar, or I guess you could say they're not educated to where they can guide the kids to different opportunities, but it doesn't mean that they don't love them.
Wide shots of the dry New Mexico landscape.
I think the families did hear the best that they can. I was able to go to these shelter workshops and tell these individuals that you do have rights. You have a right to go and explore. You don't have to stay in a shelter workshop. Dexter's one I worked with.
I work at Walmart, pushing cart, sometimes helping people. I love my job, it's pretty good.
With shelter workshops, you're kind of held to a level, a level where they think you can't do very much, but I think when Dexter went out in the community, it gave him that opportunity to explore a lot more than when they were kind of left in the shelter workshop.
Dexter smiles as he drives an electric shopping cart through the parking lot. Title, Supported Employment. Cheryl.
Supported employment has been around for almost 30 years, and supported employment was a model where you identify an appropriate job and you place the individual on the job and then train them as to how to perform the specific tasks for that job, using supports that could include a job coach.
Teresa watches Dexter as he works at Walmart.
My name is Teresa Jim. I'm the job coach for Dexter Smith. Job coach means that the individual are working out in the community. I had to coach them to monitor, make sure they do their task. He does a really good job. He's a hard worker person, and he constantly keeps himself busy. And he likes to help out customers and his coworkers.
I get paid every Thursday. Every Thursday. That's why I get paid. Just put it back in the bank for myself. I got a big account.
Jim.
When I brought these business leaders together and talked to them about closing the shelter workshop, somebody said, well, you need to have a shelter workshop. And these are people that were social workers in the community and people in the medical profession, but you need a shelter workshop. What else are they going to do? Well, I had to really explain to them that everybody can work. Maybe work isn't a program for somebody, and that's fine. Maybe work, well, I think everybody can get a job. There are some people that don't want to work. If they want to work, then our job is to find them a job. Last year, we placed over 200 people in jobs, which is a huge number.
Susan.
If we want to phase out shelter work, because we don't believe it has a place in our modern economy, then we have to make our modern economy make a place for people with disabilities to work and contribute and earn a living the same way as everyone else.
Chapter 6. Yes, there were a lot. A van drives down a tree-covered street in Portland, Oregon. Minimum wage, $10.25 per hour.
My name is Andy Owens.
Andy is in his wheelchair using an iPad to speak.
A lot of kids I went to school with went into sheltered workshops when they graduated and left school. I said no way for me. I was not going to go there. I started my job 5 days after school got out.
Andy smiles and points forward as his assistant pushes his wheelchair.
I work at Powell's bookstore. I will have worked there for 15 years in June 2016.
Andy arrives at his workstation among countless shelves of books.
I am Cynthia Owens, and I am Andy's mom. He had a near-drowning accident which caused traumatic brain injury. It's also called acquired cerebral palsy because he was so young when he had that happen. He was in a coma for 7 months after his accident and then in the hospital for about 2.5 years.
Photo of Andy as baby smiling. A tube is attached to his neck.
The doctors didn't give me very much hope for him. They said, you know, if he comes out of the coma or when he comes out of the coma, he'll be a vegetable, and that was the word they used.
Photo of Andy as a young man smiling.
And I know all of those doctors are probably retired now, but I'd someday like to just show them what the results of all of that was.
My mom had a person-centered plan done while I was in high school. We came up with all the strengths, gifts, and talents I have. Yes, there were a lot.
Title: Person-Centered Plan.
So person-centered plan is when you are really focusing on the individual. You have a facilitator of that person-centered plan who knows how to do that. You'd usually try to get a group of people together who know the individual well, who can help create a plan that has a lot of positiveness to the plan. So you're looking for strengths, you're looking for what gifts they bring. You do look at their challenges.
We narrowed it down to things I might be able to do using switches. We knew I could control my head and that I could use a switch. Then we just needed to find a job that I could do that requiring a switch.
With the person-centered plan, you've got a list of things that a job developer or a job coach could take with them to really go out there and try to help that individual find a job. They approached PALS, which, you know, they went into PALS, they saw how PALS scans the books with the barcodes when people buy these and what they had to do when they were selling them in the store. They talked to them about, gosh, we've got this individual who would be really interested in working.
I am good at my job. Powell's knows I am a dependable employee.
Andy in front of his workstation. His assistant operates the computer. Adam Henry, Andy's assistant.
I've been working with Andy full-time, though, for about a month and a half now. When we're at work, I log him in, read his emails, and then I get his iPad ready because he likes to listen to music while we're working.
I scan inventory to be shipped to stores for online pickup.
He's got his head switch comes in right here. He's got a little battery back here that powers his head switches.
Adam points out wires that run from Andy's wheelchair to a computer-controlled conveyor belt.
When I am processing the books, I use assistive technology to help me do what I cannot do physically. I use sensitive head switches that control my book loader and conveyor belt. The loader puts the books onto the conveyor belt, which brings them to the scanner in front of me. It scans the barcode on the pricing label. I verify the information on the screen while my assistant offloads the books. The books are then taken to the shipping department.
He saw his older brother and sister go to work at his age, and that's what he wanted. He wanted to go to work.
Andy advances his book loader with his head switch.
I earn $13.95 an hour,
which is considerably higher than minimum wage.
Adam points to a calendar with a number of books for each day.
Last year, Andy processed 53,758 books.
I realize that there's a lot of families who may not have opportunity with time to be able to do what we've done. This was not something anybody really taught me. It was something that we really had to go figure out. It was a lot of trial and error.
Cheryl.
We know how to support people in employment. We know how to get people with significant disability jobs. We're just not spending the money on doing it properly.
Title: Vocational Rehabilitation.
Vocational rehabilitation gets money specifically to provide services to people with disabilities so that they can obtain, maintain, or regain employment consistent with their abilities, strengths, interests, and priorities.
A lot of what we've gotten been paid for by vocational rehabilitation.
There's no question that the return on investment for individuals who actually get real jobs and real wages is great.
Andy and his friends at a bowling alley.
I want to work because I earn a paycheck, buy things, have friends, pay taxes, get a discount on all the books I want, and feel useful. I value my job and know how lucky I am to have a great job.
A ramp is next to his wheelchair, allowing him to push a bowling ball into the lane.
I think what Andy has taught me is that I can't hold him back. And that's what I was doing when I didn't think that he could do these things.
After knocking down 9 pins, Andy smiles. Chapter 7, The Joe Hawk. Joe skis down the ski slope. Joe skis by giving 2 thumbs up. Joe uses an iPad to speak.
My name is Joe Steffi. I own Poppin' Joe's Kettle Corn.
A banner reads, I love Poppin' Joe's. Joe dumps the kettle corn popper.
As a business owner, I must be able to produce every type of popcorn product that I sell and complete the daily business tasks. This includes the weekly deliveries.
Joe places bags of his popcorn on shelves in a small store.
I am always active and love being busy.
Joe looks up from his iPad and gives a thumbs up. Joe plays a bell in his church choir and then plays basketball with ER.
My name is ER. He's my uncle. I live with him and I help take care of him. The Joe Hawk, yeah, he's everywhere he goes, he'll go like this, and he wants everyone to know that he has a Joe Hawk.
ER rubs the center of his head in reference to Joe's mohawk. Joe shoots and makes 2 baskets in a row. The rolling hills of Lewisburg, Kansas. Minimum wage, $7.25 per hour.
I was 14 years old. My parents and I met with my school transition team.
Ray and Janet Steffi.
And basically what they told us was, we don't know why we need to set up a plan, in that basically Joe has no attention span. He can't keep on task. He will never hold a job. So why do we need to make a plan?
Photos of Joe as a younger man.
You know the greatest disability there is? It is low expectation. They had no expectations for me.
We were known as parents with great expectations that were in denial of how serious the disabilities were that we were facing.
This ticked me off, in that I was going to prove to these people my son could work.
Joe pours out popped corn from a kettle.
There's a workshop, and we went in there to observe what they did and that kind of thing. And basically what we saw in there wasn't what we wanted Joe to go through, and basically not get paid for doing it anyways.
A Kansas farm, cattle grazing in the background.
I grew up in a farm. We milked cows. There were cows there. There were chickens there. And so there was a lot to do. You knew where you fit in. So I expected that out of my kids.
We needed to find something that we could do as a family.
Joe, Ray, and ER working in the backyard.
We didn't even know what kettle corn was at that time. We went on a cruise to Alaska, and it was in Anchorage, Alaska on a Saturday during market day. And there was this business there that was popping popcorn, and watched them pop and sell and everything. And there was a variety of jobs within the business. You could pop the corn, you could bag the corn, you could help sell the corn. All those were different phases. Well, I thought this would be ideal for Joe, because when he got tired of one, he could move to another one, whichever one he wanted to do.
I learned by watching and would do exactly as I saw it done.
which comes down to what customized employment is.
Title: Customized Employment.
Janet went to classes to learn how to write a business plan. We submitted that to the DD Council in Kansas, which at that time they were supporting people starting their own business. So they gave him all new equipment.
Joe making, bagging, and delivering the kettle corn.
And then we went to Social Security through their PASS plan. They supported the finances of his business by giving him cash flow money to make the business work for an 18-month period of time. And then we also got equipment from the Voc Rehab people for a computer and a printer to make labels. And so that's how we got started. And it became on the 5th day of April in 2005, the business became Joe's business, and he was the sole proprietor of that business and has been till this day.
Photo of Joe proudly holding papers in his hand.
We help manage the business. People say, well, how does he do his accounting? Well, like any other business, if you don't do accounting, then you hire an accountant. So that's what we do. We hire the people that are needed to run specific parts of the business. But basically, Joe is the owner of the business.
Joe and Ray wear matching tie-dye bandanas as they work at a stand selling popcorn.
Festivals average 3 weekends each month, April through October. I have several retail outlet stores where I supply products on a weekly basis, as well as internet sales.
Say we're out shopping. Somebody sees me and they'll say, "Are you Poppin' Joe?" And you can just see Joe stands up straighter and gets a big smile, and he knows he's Poppin' Joe.
Exterior of Joe's house.
Then the business has given him the opportunity to rent his own place, pay utilities. He buys his own food. He's not on any subsidy for food or housing or utilities. He pays his own way, and then he gets to choose the activities that he likes.
Joe skis to the ski lift. Ray and Janet look on as Joe takes the lift up.
When we're gone, then the business could go ahead and support him in the same manner. What we would like to see is to bring on a person who would be interested in being a partner in the business, doing the management part of the business. And Joe would keep the capacity that he has as being an owner.
On a farm, it's a team effort. You all pull together to make it happen.
In the backyard, the family works together making kettle corn.
We expected Joe to be a part of and to do the part that he could do from the very beginning.
Chapter 8. I've got the jersey to prove it. The Bob Boyd car dealership in Brandon, Mississippi. Minimum wage, $7.25 per hour.
My name's Trust Jones. I'm from Brandon, Mississippi, and I'm 23 years old.
Trust walks through the dealership to a back office.
Every time when I come back here, I always go for one thing, my check. I come here to get my check. Best one ever.
Hey, Trust.
Hi.
How you doing, sir?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Very good.
Trust receives his paycheck from his boss and coworker.
Every time I come here, this is what I get.
He gets paid.
Every single time. And I love it. I love it. Best job ever.
Trust proudly holds his check over his head.
My mom worked, my brother worked, my sisters worked, and I knew I had to put in work. My current job is with Bob Boyd Honda. Last check I got was $324. The most money ever. Didn't spend it all.
Cheryl.
We know that there are people with disabilities going to work, but oftentimes we look at that as, oh, isn't that remarkable or isn't that incredible? We need to start to recognize that people with disabilities have skills and talents, and we need to encourage those and support those.
Trust's manager, Tiffany Boyd.
Trust has not only just gotten a job here, I think he's built a purpose within this dealership. He's given us something that we haven't had. We saw very quickly that he was really good with technology.
Trust sits in his cubicle looking at a Facebook page on his computer.
My job was to oversee the Facebook and Twitter pages of Bob Boyd, and it was good. We got a lot of feedback from customers, a lot of likes.
It is not charity for us at all. I don't think the dealership would be the same without him.
Concord, New Hampshire. Minimum wage, $7.25 per hour.
My name is Amy Messer. I'm the executive director at the Disability Rights Center in New Hampshire. Oftentimes, people just simply don't understand that individuals with disabilities bring everything to the workplace that everybody without disabilities brings as well. They bring their skills and their talents, their dedication, their collegiality, and so I think people underestimate actually the value of employment for people with disabilities to the employer.
The Quality Cash Market, a local grocery store. Brendan Welch.
My name is Brendan. I'm 30 years old. I grew up in Concord, yep.
Brendan clocks in.
I do the floors, I do the soul cooler, the beer cooler, the dishes, and anything else they want me to do.
Brendan works quickly in different parts of the store. Brendan's manager, Liz Duncan.
Brendan has a really good approach with people. He takes a lot of pride into what he's doing, and so when he wants to, and we try to get him a little bit more responsibility, he does get really nervous, but we just kind of coach him along, and he really does take responsibility very well. He likes to joke around a lot, which, we're good with it, you know.
Sometimes people call me a pain in the butt because I can be a pain in the butt. It's all family, but treat me as a family member.
Amy.
If you talk to employers who have individuals with disabilities employed in their workplace, you're going to hear a lot of really positive stories.
Liz.
I've had several people who have had disabilities come in and ask for a job. And it's not as, I fill out an application. If I know that you're qualified, I'm going to hire you.
Brendan.
And I like the people, and I like conversation, and I like to be friendly with everybody.
Trust.
It's great. I interact with customers, I talk to the workers, I get paid. I love it.
Sometimes I take my mom out to lunch on Sunday, or I take her out to dinner.
My favorite team is Pittsburgh Steelers, and I've got the Chucks, the jersey, the backpack, and the cap to prove it. The internet department.
Trust walks back to his desk. Tiffany.
I could not imagine those two in a sheltered workshop. You wouldn't go do a job that would pay you $1 on the hour or something like that because you're worth more. They're worth more.
Chapter 9, The Chance to Rise. Stephanie Woodward waits for the next question from the interviewer.
So what am I missing? What haven't I asked you about that's important?
How do we change it?
Justin Young speaks to a camera at a protest of goodwill.
Section 14C of the Fair Labor Standards Act says that people with disabilities can be paid sub-minimum wage. We don't feel that's right. We feel our rights should be honored just like every other population in this nation.
I'm Jensen Terabello. I'm an activist for disability rights. Protesting isn't something that we do first. We always, take other advocacy avenues. Once we know that we're not getting anywhere, we organize actions. You get in people's faces and you let them know this isn't right, we're not going to stand for this. No pun intended.
Protesters hold up signs with slogans like sub-minimum equals subhuman.
14C certificate under the Fair Labor Standards Act says that people with disabilities are less than everyone else, and we don't deserve to get paid like everyone else. And that's wrong. We have the power to make that change.
A painting on the side of a building in Tiffin, Ohio. Barbara Corner from Disability Rights, Ohio.
If somebody in a sheltered workshop or their parent or guardian wishes to challenge their wages, they can file a request with the Department of Labor.
Pamela shops for supplies.
We decided that we wanted to follow that process.
Pamela Stewart.
The judge is ruling on our behalf, and he feels the same way we do, that we're being mistreated. I make minimum wage now, and I'm happy about that. I want to be able to move up to where I'm getting paid really good.
Pamela threads a needle.
I'd like to go back to California. Not sure how much a plane ticket costs nowadays to go there.
Jim Larson from Morningside.
I really had a celebration of closing the shelter workshop. It was the second best day of my career. The first one was signing a letter back to the Federal Department of Labor and saying, I choose not to renew this certificate. 2014, we stopped paying sub-minimum wages.
Brendan cleans dishes at work. Amy Messer.
New Hampshire was the first in the nation to eliminate sub-minimum wage for people with disabilities.
Charles Beeble walks with his white cane.
By the year 2020, Maryland is supposed to phase out paying sub-minimum wages to people with disabilities, blind people and such. And that's a good thing.
Stephanie Woodward.
A minimum wage is just that. The minimum any worker should receive.
Title: 48 states still allow sub-minimum wage. Gloria Marrero uses sign language.
Oh yeah, I want to earn more money. Well, sure. I'd like to have a little bit more money.
Gloria smiles. Joe plays a bell during church. LaRon Jackson.
After I got that check of $2.50 for working in a hot workshop with hot big fans, I said I quit. I can go find me something else to do.
Teresa watches Dexter work. Cheryl Bates Harris.
If individuals are given the proper services and supports and proper assistive technology, the sky is the limit for many, many individuals.
Hugh Bertolin.
I make $9.59 an hour. Now I get 4 weeks vacation. I get paid for my vacation.
Sarah Frost.
I want to move up more at Children's in the receiving department.
LaRon drives his wheelchair through his office.
I went to school. I got my degree. I work with Disability Rights Mississippi. I'm an advocate for people with disabilities.
Trust Jones.
I've been working for 2 years, had great internships and jobs.
Trust holds up his paycheck proudly.
And it's not just for me, Trust Jones, lives in Mississippi. It's to every state.
Joe bags popcorn, Sarah at the subway.
To the Northeast.
Dexter pushes carts.
The Southwest. The Midwest.
Pamela sews.
I may have a disability, but I can still work.
Photo of President Roosevelt in a wheelchair.
I am still convinced that the American people continue to insist on sincere respect for the need of all people at the bottom who need to get work.
Sarah guiding a horse.
And through work to get a really fair share of the good things of life.
Andy smiling at the bowling alley. Joe skis towards the camera.
And a chance to save and a chance to rise.
Connect. Find more stories. Advocate for change. BottomDollarsMovie.com. End credits roll. Produced and directed by Jordan Melograna. Executive producers David Carlson, Mark Stroh. Cinematography and editing by Jordan Melograna. Associate producer Tina Pinedo. Original music by Katrina Melograna. Thank you to those who appeared in the film: Melanie Oyer, Gloria Marrero, Mark Riccobono, Cheryl Bates Harris, Pamela Stewart, Barbara Corner, LaRon Jackson, Charles Beeble, Roy Roca, James Metters, Betty Williams, Stephanie Woodward, Tillman Mitchell, Dorothy Mitchell, Joan Farish, Sarah Frost, Robin Frost, Scott Frost, Tanya Hart Newkirk, Susan Cass, Jim Larson, Hugh Bertolin, Dexter Smith, Yolanda Sandoval-Nez, Teresa Jim, Andy Owens, Cynthia Owens, Adam Henry, Joe Steffi, E.R. Steffi, Ray Steffi, Janet Steffi, Trust Jones, Tiffany Boyd, Amy Messer, Brendan Welch, Liz Duncan, Justin Young, Jensen Caraballo, sound editor and mixer, Justin Newton, audio description narrator, Tina Marie Murray, opening titles designed by Mariah Burton, Jordan Melograna, production assistants, Courtney Cole, Vanessa Link, Rebecca Price, Kukis Robledo, Paul Shaver, outreach and promotion by Kirsten Holmdale, Tina Pinedo, Stacy Siebrecht, ASL interpreter, Stuart Tennis, sign-on hearing, Speech and Deafness Center. Archival footage provided by Rick Ray Shutterstock, Pond 5. Additional footage courtesy of Disability Rights Mississippi, the National Federation of the Blind. Special thanks, the National Disability Rights Network, Kansas Disability Rights Center of Kansas, Rocky Nichols, Mike Burgess, Lewisburg Cider Mill, Snow Creek Ski Resort, Jennifer Stratton, Sunflower Ringers, Beverly Williamson, New Mexico, Native American Disability Law Center, Coyote Ridge, Jessica Jones, Walmart Gallup, New York, the Center for Disability Rights, Elizabeth Forbes, Maryland, Chris Danielson, the National Federation of the Blind. Ohio, Stacy Brannon Smith, Disability Rights Ohio. Michael Kirkman, Mississippi. Bob Boyd, Honda, Disability Rights Mississippi. Gathering Grounds Coffee Shop, La Quinta Inn and Suites, Vicksburg. Ann McLean, Shirley Walker, Oregon. Michelle Afrozo, Tara Asai, Disability Rights, Oregon. Powell's Books, Sunset Lanes, New Hampshire. Boston Children's Hospital, Brian Beckert. Andrea Dugan, Disability Rights Center, New Hampshire. Giddy Up Farm, Julia Freeman Wolpert. One Sky Community Services, VPNE, Washington. Heather McKimmey, Lori Schindler, Morningside Services. Stacy Siebrecht. Produced with generous support from Disability Rights Washington. Animated Rooted in Rights logo. A tree grows out of the word rooted, as roots grow in the word rights, with the slogan, disability rights are human rights beneath it.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact Washington State Department of Services for the Blind at 800-552-7103 or visit dsb.wa.gov. The Department of Social and Health Services at 800-637-5627 or visit dshs.wa.gov/DVR. National Federation of the Blind at 425-823-6380 or visit nfbw.org. The Washington Council of the Blind at 800-255-1147 or visit wcbinfo.org. Disability Rights Washington at 800-562-2702 or visit disabilityrightswa.org.
City buses en route.
Metro Transit has 1,500 coaches in its fleet.
They kind of go in and out of the bases twice a day. And then there's the service that stays on the road throughout the day. And then there's that nighttime service. They call it the night owl service. So we're kind of always running 24 hours a day.
That's a lot of miles and a lot of paperwork that ends up here.
A Metro Transit facility.
Damage reports.
There's a lot of documentation. There's a lot of regulatory type requirements.
I just organize them by the route and run.
So thousands and thousands and thousands of these documents are produced.
And these are all the damage reports from 2018.
But now the safety office has a little more help.
Janet.
I was really enjoying my time organizing and getting things all cleaned up.
Being able to kind of capture those and just have a simple filing system and a way to organize them was something that Janet's really been able to help us do very, very well.
I'm always being a neat freak about things, try to keep things clean at my desk.
She'll organize them, put them by base, put them numerically by number, and then she'll let me know when they're all done. That's a lot of work. But she does a fantastic job, fantastic job.
Janet is a recent hire into our Supported Employment Program, and Supported Employment is a county program that matches candidates with developmental disabilities into county positions. Candidates have the support of a state-funded job coach to help them with the onboarding and training process, and then throughout their tenure at King County.
Janet.
Metro is a really great place to work. I really enjoy working here.
Janet's great. She came in here with like a ball of fire. She was ready to get going. Super energetic, super friendly, very engaging.
She gives suggestions and ideas on how to make it easier, on how to make it more organized.
It's made us more efficient and more effective as a safety staff in general, the safety office, to have this type of backing and support from Janet.
Janet high-fives a coworker. A URL in white text, kingcounty.gov/supported-employment. Text on screen, King County Metro's non-revenue vehicle garage. These guys can fix anything. In the background, an auto repair shop. Tom, the vehicle maintenance chief.
We have some very talented mechanics here. You got to have a pretty wide variety of skills and knowledge. It takes care of, just about anything that comes in the door.
Brandon.
How's it going?
Brandon is the newest team member.
And now that we have Brandon here, we're trying a little extra customer service.
There we go.
Brandon moves the rear hatch of a van up and down.
That's what you call a workout.
He scrubs the van and then sprays it with a hose.
Brandon is a part of King County's Supported Employment Program. Supported Employment is a county program that matches candidates with developmental disabilities to county positions. It's called Supported Employment because candidates have the support of a state-funded job coach to help them with the onboarding and training process and then throughout their tenure at King County.
And then you just clean it up.
Brandon washing cars at the garage.
Oh yes, it's fun to wash in the car. Trucks, vans, Prius, everything.
Brandon vacuums the back of a van.
It didn't take Brandon long to work in and feel comfortable with the guys and start joking around, you know.
I like it. I get along with my co-workers. They respect me, and I respect them.
Brandon's done very well. He's good at, you know, you tell him what we need done, and he goes to it, and he comes back to me and says, okay, I'm done with that. What do you want next? You know, so he's been doing very good.
And then this job keep me nice and focused and stay independent. Get that very good.
Yeah, he gives him the opportunity to do a job, you know, that he may not have in other places.
Nice and clean.
The program has started to grow because of the support from King County leadership and the labor unions.
It helps us. It's a great idea.
See you later.
Brandon waves goodbye. On-screen text reads kingcounty.gov/supported employment.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact Washington Initiative for Supported Employment at 206-343-0881 or visit gowise.org. Department of Social and Health Services, Developmental Disabilities Administration at 360-407-1500 or visit dshs.wa.gov/DDA. Washington State Department of Services for the Blind at 800-552-7103 or visit dsb.wa.gov. Department of Social and Health Services, Division of Vocational Rehabilitation at 800-637-5627 or visit dshs.wa.gov/DVR.
My name is Rolanda Carrier, and I'm the Program Manager for the Customer Service Centers with the City of Seattle. One piece of giving great customer service is listening to what the customer is asking for, looking at what their situation is, and knowing what to offer them, or that something, making sure that they get what they came in for and maybe a little bit more.
I'm Carrie Bossis. I'm a civil rights lawyer. I live in the Magnolia neighborhood of Seattle, and I'm the mom of Joshua, who's 9 years old and has disabilities.
My name is Ariel Bello. My sign name is an A on one shoulder and L on the other shoulder.
Hi, my name is Denise Jordan. This is my name sign, a D wiggling in front of the nose because it matches the sign for being silly.
My name is Barry Long, and I was born in Pullman. I'm a Washington native, and I put myself in a wheelchair with a motorcycle crash 28 years ago, and now work in real estate.
Hi everyone, my name is Kamaria Atmock. I live in Seattle, Washington.
Kamaria stands outside the Northgate Community Center. Barry.
Every single disability for every single person is different, and there's a misconception out there that when somebody thinks disability, primarily they think wheelchair. They don't necessarily think about the blind or the deaf-blind or those who have developmental disabilities.
Hi, my name is Debra Khan. My name sign is a D on the chin, and I am deaf-blind. I recently moved to Seattle almost 4 years ago now. I have an interpreter sitting to my side who is using PT, or Pro-Tactile Sign Language, on me to give me visual information of what's happening in my surroundings.
Debra tactile signing with a colleague at the Deaf-Blind Service Center.
I think I need to be clear about the term deaf-blind. It can include a wide range of people. There are many differences. For example, people who are hard of hearing and prefer to speak
for themselves and listen to speech, to those who are profoundly deaf and fluent in ASL. Likewise, some people have some limited vision, whereas others are completely blind.
Hi, my name is Corey Joseph. I'm a user experience engineer, and I live in Belltown in Seattle.
Corey with his guide dog outside the Seattle Public Library.
When thinking about my disability and how I identify with it, I really identify it as a blind person. I think euphemisms for disabled or disability are actually insulting. I'm not differently abled. I'm not handy capable. I have a disability. I am blind.
Denise signing.
We hear the term hearing impaired a lot. And I'm using sort of a negative sign to even indicate it. Whenever I see that term hearing impaired, I don't like it. Instead, I consider myself deaf, and I use a capital D in the beginning of that word.
Barry.
I prefer that people actually refer to me versus the disability, you know, that I'm Barry, and I don't mind if they say, oh, it's Barry and he's in a wheelchair, because that is a descriptive of who I am. But it's not the wheelchair guy named Barry. People assume because I have a disability that there's certain things that I can and can't do. So there's this assumption of what my disability means to them that isn't necessarily the case. Because I'm in a chair, they don't think that I can lift, or because I'm in a chair, there's certain things that they don't expect that I can do, or they expect that I have to do.
Barry approaches a parked red Mustang.
I actually drive an old hot rod, and whenever I pull many times when I pull my hot rod into a disabled spot, people give me the glares, the stares, because they automatically assume that I should be driving something else. The ADA has impacted my life massively because I know that there are guidelines set in place that when I go to a public building or a public facility that I know that I'll be able to get in.
Barry pushes a button and rolls through an automatic door.
One way I'd like people to think about the ADA is I'd really like them to think about it as an opportunity rather than a punishment or something they're afraid of. There's a lot in there to understand, but I think that the disability community is quite receptive and often forgiving for mistakes that people can make, as long as there's an openness to learning.
Carrie with her husband and daughter on the monorail. Denise signing.
People who know nothing about our culture and about deafness, if I were to meet them and they turn to me, they automatically start to speak. And when I indicate that I can't hear them, right away their facial expression changes, they suddenly get flustered, they don't know what to say to me, they get completely lost. And I'm thinking, what's the difference between who I just was a minute ago?
Ariel signing.
I appreciate customer service that's deaf-friendly, which means, first of all, the person needs to be patient. Someone who's willing to take the time to communicate, whether that means writing notes back and forth, someone who's not going to give up or rush, and communicate fully until we're able to have the conversation completed. And also that includes eye contact and providing me with information about what's happening.
Debra signing.
I really appreciate it when people are willing to be patient. They're willing to write notes back and forth with me. If they're using a regular pen, I'll ask them to switch and use the black marker. That's easier for me to see. And it's just so critical that people are willing to be patient and take the time to communicate.
A person smiles and hands a notebook and pen back to Debra, who reads the information and signs "Thank you." Kamaria.
The good customer experience is that some people, they'll greet me with, "Hi, good morning, good afternoon, how are you?"
Kamaria and a staff member prepare food in the kitchen at the Northgate Community Center.
Sometimes when people give me instructions or information, it makes me feel really comfortable. When people are using good manners, positive attitude, and friendly personality.
Carrie.
The largest barriers are about attitudinal access and really belonging in communities. And I think cities and governments can facilitate that if they deal with some of those underlying elements like physical access and sensory access and communication access, but they also need to go further.
Carrie with her husband and daughter on the monorail. Corey.
Accessibility to me doesn't just mean compliance. It means that I can complete the task just as efficiently as someone else without a disability.
Corey prints and reads a Braille document.
To me, the best customer service I ever receive is from people that can really adapt easily and are willing to ask what I need to complete the task. For example, coming to the Seattle Public Library. When I walk in, there's a desk person there that asks me if I need help immediately as soon as they see me standing there with a service animal.
Carrie.
I think one of the biggest myths about disability, it really has to do with lack of expectations about people with disabilities. And the expectations that do exist are through a really normative mindset. When we think about disability, we also think about it through a charitable model. At least that's what I see from non-disabled people. And so when we're talking about things like accessibility or belonging in communities, it becomes up to non-disabled people about how much they want to welcome us into those spaces. And it really becomes a question of what they're willing to give us versus civil rights or just seeing us as other members of the city's communities.
Debra signing.
Also, people should be less condescending. Treat us with respect and as equals.
Denise signing.
Whether you know sign language or not, whether you know how to communicate directly with us or not, if you just take the time, we know how to communicate with you and we will help you. So just be patient with us. Thanks.
Carrie.
In an ideal world, what that would look like is just feeling free to just pick an activity that's being advertised and go, and know that there will be a process or there will be staff, even if things don't go perfectly, that will respond in a way that's compassionate and honoring, and that when we're around other people, they'll be so used to seeing other people with disabilities, particularly kids with disabilities and families with disabilities, that we won't feel socially isolated.
There's this fear of offending, but if you ask appropriately and you're nice and you're asking for the right reasons, then ask the questions, so you can find the right answer to help the person as much as possible.
Barry drives away in his red Mustang.
A sign with the word community and then stories as it maneuvers through a city in the hands of fast-moving people. Now, both words appear on a single sign held in place by dozens of shifting hands. Community stories.
Cyrus Habib, From Braille to Yale.
The Washington Talking Book and Braille Library.
At the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, he's a virtual rock star. A Rhodes Scholar, lawyer, state representative, and senator who at age 35 became Washington State's Lieutenant Governor. Who is Cyrus Habib?
A photo of a young Cyrus with his family.
My parents came to the U.S. from Iran. My dad came in 1970. My mom came later in the decade and moved to Maryland, and that's where I was born. I was born in the Baltimore area.
Photos of Cyrus as a small boy.
Shortly after I was born, I was diagnosed with a rare form of childhood eye cancer. It took my eyesight in my left eye as a newborn, and then it came back again and took my eyesight in my right eye, leaving me completely blind at age 8. The experience of losing my eyesight as a child was obviously extremely difficult for me, but it was, I think, more difficult and painful for my parents. I'm an only child, and so as you can imagine, it was very difficult for them to see me in pain, to see me going through chemotherapy and radiation and surgeries and all the various interventions for childhood cancer. And then, of course, it was extremely frightening for them, the idea of me being blind, most likely for the rest of my life. But they made an early commitment to each other, right at that time, that they would never let their fear become my fear, that they would never let their apprehension be communicated to me, and that I should never internalize that sense of doubt or fear about what would be possible.
When he was 8 years old, Cyrus's family moved from Baltimore, Maryland to Bellevue, Washington.
Dreamlike and slow-moving footage of playground equipment.
I often tell a story about how shortly after I became blind, I was in 3rd grade, and as kids often do, We would all look forward to recess time on the playground and go out and play on the jungle gym and the other playground equipment. And I think knowing that I had recently become blind and knowing that my mother is a lawyer and a litigator, the school wasn't too thrilled about me playing with the other kids on the playground, particularly on the slippery monkey bars and swing sets 5 feet off the ground. So they kept me by the side of the school. They kept me with the recess monitors while the other kids were playing. So I went home, I told my parents what was happening and that I was being excluded, and my mom took me with her to the school the next day. She took me with her to the principal's office so that I could learn how to become an advocate for myself. And she said to the principal, you know, I'm going to take my son to your school on the weekends, and I'm going to take him there. I'm going to teach him how to get around the jungle gym, and I'm going to teach him how to get around the entire playground. And she said, you know, it may happen that he may slip and fall. And it may even happen that he may slip and fall and break his arm. That's a fear that any mother has. But then she said, I can fix a broken arm, I can never fix a broken spirit. And that moment was so critical. It was so important to me to learn early on that I deserve to be included, that even though I may have to work harder than others or learn things in a different way, that I deserve to have a place and to fulfill my own potential and aspirations just like any other kid.
Cyrus was a graduate of Columbia University, a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford University, and he received a law degree from Yale Law School.
A photo of Cyrus with Hillary Clinton.
While an undergraduate at Columbia University, Cyrus interned in Senator Hillary Clinton's New York office.
My first day of work in Hillary's New York City office was September 14th, 2001. So what would have been your run-of-the-mill congressional internship, you know, answering phones and getting coffee and licking envelopes, became a very special opportunity to serve, because what we did was we spent that year helping displaced individuals and businesses from Lower Manhattan find new homes in New Jersey, in other boroughs of New York, in suburbs of New York City. And so what I learned in that experience is that government can't and shouldn't do everything, but what government is uniquely positioned to do is to help an individual, a family, a community, a city, or even a country that is in crisis. And so I just developed a profound appreciation for how government can help constituents that are going through some really, really difficult times.
A towering and windowed downtown building.
After law school, I came back to Washington State. I accepted a position with Perkins Coie, which is a law firm not only known for its private sector clients, it's the largest private law firm in the state, but also for having a very rich tradition of doing pro bono work and working in the community. And so I practiced law for 4 years there before joining the Washington State House of Representatives.
Barack Obama.
Most importantly, you know that I'll fight for you and your families every single day.
I was inspired to run for office by a few different events. One was Barack Obama's candidacy, and I think that a generation of young people of color from diverse backgrounds were inspired by what seemed to many of us, even those of us who were optimistic about America, to be impossible. President Obama proved possible with his candidacy and his win.
Governor Inslee.
So Susan, is with delight, I'm presenting you with the letter appointing you to Superior Court. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was also inspired by my mom, who ran for King County Superior Court judge.
ESHB 2023.
I'm particularly proud that in my first term in the State House of Representatives, I authored and passed the Washington Jobs Act of 2014.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
That piece of legislation authorized so-called crowdfunding for startup businesses.
Today, we're proud to share our newest creation, the Spirit Rover, a desktop version of the famous rover sent to Mars.
So that businesses can raise money by issuing small amounts of stock to investors.
By backing this project, you'll help us buy parts in larger quantities and cover the tooling costs for Spirit's custom parts.
And all of a sudden now you have people in the community who never thought of themselves before as business owners being shareholders in a community-based business, and they're invested in it. And we've heard great stories of how that's being used.
A TV ad.
Some politicians don't hear what we need, but Cyrus does.
My name is Cyrus Habib. When I lost my eyesight as a child, I learned to listen.
In 2016, Cyrus Habib announced his candidacy for Lieutenant Governor of Washington. He was supported and endorsed by President Barack Obama.
I really enjoyed serving in the State House and the State Senate. But as I was serving in the Senate and I learned about the various roles that the Lieutenant Governor plays, I was really drawn to this office. I gave it a lot of thought and consideration and decided that this job was the perfect match for my interests and experiences.
I actually happen to think it's pretty cool that you all elected a 3-time cancer surviving, fully blind Iranian-American from a mixed religion immigrant family to be Lieutenant Governor. Thank you. Thank you.
A really critical part of what the Lieutenant Governor does is preside over the State Senate. First order of business, standing committee reports, Secretary will read. What that means is that I not only call on senators to speak, but also resolve controversial, procedural, parliamentary, or constitutional questions that come up during the Senate debate.
Enormous and stacked shipping containers roll through a railway crossing.
But another part of the job of the Lieutenant Governor is to lead on a number of economic development and international trade initiatives.
A container is hoisted onto a massive ship.
Promoting Washington's exports is vitally important, and probably more important now in light of some of the statements being made from the White House, probably more important than ever. And so I was very drawn to the ability of this office to work on economic development, not just for one district, but truly for the entire state. I've really enjoyed doing that. One final piece of the job that really can't be overstated is the degree to which, as an independently elected official, you can choose your priorities and set your agenda.
If we're honest with ourselves, if we believe that prosperity is for everyone, then we need to be honest and say that college is also for everyone.
And we've made focusing on expanding opportunity for youth, veterans, and people with disabilities the core of our office mission. I benefited tremendously from adaptive software and other technologies growing up that allowed me to learn how to read and go to school and do my job.
Engrossed Senate Bill 5111 on third reading and final passage. Remarks, Senator Braun.
And right now, I'm so proud and excited that we have pioneered technology in the Washington State Senate so that I can recognize senators and call on them independently without the help of a sighted person. And the way it works is that every senator has a touch screen on their desk, and when they want to speak, they stand up and touch their screen, and what that does is it conveys their name to a Braille display that is sitting right in front of me at the front of the Senate chamber, and I can read the names of all the senators wishing to be recognized and call on them in the order that makes sense.
Senator Frocht.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise for a point of personal privilege.
Please state your point of personal privilege.
This is technology that, to our knowledge, has never been used before, and it just shows that when we are committed to inclusion, we can make even the most challenging sorts of tasks for people who are blind or experience other disabilities accessible.
We've got a lot to celebrate here in Washington State, but we've got a lot of things to be worried about nationally.
As the first Iranian-American to hold statewide elected office and to date the highest ranking Iranian-American, I do feel a particular sense of responsibility, not only to show that it is possible to run and win elected office, but also to stick up for our fellow Americans of Iranian descent, but also from other Middle Eastern descents. And, I'll tell you, of the 7 countries named by President Trump in his executive order on immigration, I'm the only statewide elected official descended from any of those 7 countries. And so I did feel from the moment I learned of that executive order a strong sense of responsibility to speak out, It's inhumane, it's barbaric, it's un-American, and it's the kind of behavior that we had committed decades ago to having learned was un-American. We are all just as patriotic as communities as any other set of new Americans, and that's why I was proud to author an op-ed in the Washington Post, proud to work with Governor Inslee and our Attorney General Bob Ferguson to make sure that Washington State is leading the charge for equal rights for Middle Eastern Americans and others.
So who is Cyrus Habib?
I think about my life and I think about the challenges that I faced early on, and I always go back to the experience of having been excluded and having to fight to be included again. And I really think that at my core, I'm somebody who always remembers that sense of being on the outside. And I feel a strong sense of solidarity with everybody who feels excluded for some reason, excluded from the educational or economic or political system in this country. And so what animates me and motivates me every day to go to work and to do this job is to make sure that nobody feels that sense of exclusion, that everybody feels what it means to be included in this great country. And I truly think that if it weren't for that childhood experience or those childhood experiences, I don't know that I would burn with that same passion, but that's what excites me each and every day.
Credits appear on screen and include producer-writer Ralph Bevins, associate producer Brian Callanan, photographers Ralph Bevins and Randy Ang, editor Ralph Bevins, narration by Anita Shakar Ackerkar, Seattle Channel Community Stories, executive producer Shannon Gee, opening David Russo, Community Stories theme Stephen Thomas, copyright 2018 Seattle Channel. A Seattle Channel production.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact Deafblind Service Center at 833-235-5550 or visit seattledbsc.org. Washington Talking Book and Braille Library at 800-542-0866 or visit wtbbl.org. Northwest ADA Center at 800-949-4232 or visit nwadaCenter.org. Accessible Design and Innovative Inclusion at ccer.org/ADII. Washington Assistive Technology Act Program at 800-214-8731 or visit watap.org. The Seattle Public Library Library Equal Access Program at 206-615-1380 or visit leap@spl.org.
How to host accessible online meetings. A young man uses an assistive speech device he presents through a video call window.
This is Blake. As great as it is to connect with people through remote events, meetings, and workshops, we've all been on enough calls to know that some are better than others. From dark and dizzying camera angles that should come with a flashlight and nausea medicine, to distracting background noise from other participants. There are a lot of ways things can go wrong. It'd be great to have some guidelines to make the whole thing more accessible to everybody, you know. So that's why we called up some experts, people with disabilities, to share how you can make your video calls more accessible to everybody.
Hi, my name is Sean. I am an African American male, and I also have a intellectual and developmental disability.
Hi everyone, I'm Jessie, Jessie, and I identify as deaf or hard of hearing. I am also Chinese American.
Hi, I'm Wale Sabri. You can call me Wally. I identify as blind and I am Middle Eastern, and my gender pronoun is he/they.
A woman signs while someone off-screen interprets.
Hi,
I'm Melissa. This is my name. I'm deaf and Latina.
We know we can't cover everything, so we're just going to focus on 4 main points: preparation, communication, participation, and evaluation. Number 1, preparation. Have we made sure people have what they need?
This is song. If you are hosting, you should have accessible plain language invitation that includes access information. That means share what will not be accessible, like if you will not have live caption. Assigning someone to take notes is key, because that way the participants can focus on the whole meeting and don't have to worry about writing everything down.
Hi, this is Jessie. I'm going to encourage you to schedule real-time captioning, also known as CART or CART, and also American Sign Language interpreters before you are being asked. It's really important to remember that not all deaf or hard of hearing participate, no American Sign Language or ASL. And in order to give your captioners and interpreters enough time to prepare, please make sure to schedule services at least 1 week in advance. You should also set an agenda or snacks ahead of time. And so that way, your interpreters and the captioners can be more familiar with how they can spell the presenters' names and the special unique terms in your presentation.
This is Wale. On that note, you should also send these resources to attendees ahead of time and make sure they're accessible. It's also important to send slides to attendees ahead of time so that folks with assistive technologies can view these slides on their own personal devices. Folks who use screen readers can read and follow along the presentation, and folks who use magnification and inverted colors can view the presentation in a way that they prefer.
This is Melissa. It's very important that you know how to set up good, clear audio and video on whatever platform it is that you're utilizing. Use headphones and mute yourself when you're not speaking to reduce interference or noise or feedback. Make sure your meeting's in an area that's quiet with good lighting and as little distraction as possible. If your video is too dark, it can be difficult for people to read your lips or to see your facial expressions. So you use a narrow window, use a lamp, or even if you can turn up the brightness on your computer, it will help people see your beautiful face.
Number 2, communication. Can everyone understand what's going on?
This is Wale. To include folks who are blind or who might be joining by phone, you should describe the content that's on your slides or when screen sharing. You should also describe when people give a thumbs up, other gestures, or when people laugh and the mic is muted so everyone can join in on the fun.
Hi, this is Jessie. I'm going to encourage you to ask people to share their names each time they speak. So for example, I will say, this is Jessie speaking. And why is so important? It's so important because these are not the people who are participating, the captioners and the interpreters to know who is saying what. And it's also really helpful for people who are calling in. For example, a deaf person cannot look at the interpreters and check to see who is speaking at the same time. When the interpreters and the captioners can see and identify who is speaking at any time, it is so much easier for us to follow the conversation, and as not cameras, our eyes cannot be in 2 places at once.
This is Melissa. Make sure that people in the meeting speak slowly and clearly. It's important that the interpreters and the captioners are able to understand clearly what it is you're trying to say, so they're able to interpret and caption and translate appropriately.
This is song. If you are going to use abbreviation, make sure you tell us what it means. For example, I have a intellectual and developmental disability, also known as IDD. Everyone knows what a disability is, but they might not know the abbreviation. Make sure you look in the camera when you are going to use advanced words. You can also send out a list of words ahead of time.
Number 3, participation. Can everyone actively contribute to the conversation?
Mrs. Jessie, make sure that there are multiple ways for people to communicate with each other and with the group. So, for example, you can tap in your chat box or use raise your hand button.
This is Wale. A co-host can be helpful in answering questions, sharing people's comments, and muting folks when needed. They can also help with troubleshooting tech issues.
This is Sean. Some people with disabilities might need more time to think of any questions, comments, or concerns that they might have. You can embrace awkwardness because it's okay. Silence is okay.
Number 4, evaluation. What can we do better next time?
This is Melissa. It is so important. Even if you felt like the meeting has gone really well, it's important to ask for feedback from those that were involved after each meeting, making sure that anyone who has concerns can express them. Even if you feel like it's gone really well, there's always ways to improve.
This is Blake. Now you know some tips to make your online meetings go more smoothly. This advice benefits everyone. No one likes distracting noises or being left out of the conversation. Accessible meetings are effective meetings. Make sure everyone has the best experience possible by making accessibility a priority.
Funded by the King County Department of Natural Resources and Parks Wastewater Treatment Division and the Coal Creek Sewer Upgrade Project. #AccessThat. Audio description in a snap. An audio description is a verbal description that conveys important visual information. It can help people who are blind and low vision fully understand things like video, events, artworks, or locations. Audio description is usually presented in one of two ways, either live and in person by a trained describer, or as a recorded narration. Hollywood films, Netflix, and other major film and TV productions often hire professional audio describers to write and voice the description of their videos. See if your favorite Netflix show or movie has audio description by clicking on the dialogue icon near the bottom of the player and searching for it in the audio column. Social media video creators can hire professional describers and voice actors too, but by following a few simple rules, getting started with audio description is actually pretty easy. First, make sure to talk your text. If you are relying on your audience to receive information by reading, your video is not accessible. Avoid this by making sure you narrate all important text that appears on screen. This includes title cards and lower thirds. Second, always introduce. Whenever possible, have the people in your videos introduce themselves as they appear. This way, it's easier to identify speakers and differentiate between them throughout the video. Having people introduce themselves with name and title often removes the need for inaccessible lower thirds entirely. Third, describe scenes that aren't heard. If a scene or moment is purely visual, like if a magician silently pulls a white rabbit from her top hat, or with a tap of her black wand makes her assistant disappear, it needs to be described. Try watching the videos you make with your eyes closed. What critical information are you missing? You may find this confusing at first. What is the critical visual information? There isn't always a simple answer, but by asking yourself the question, and by beginning to fill in missing gaps with the tips in this video, you'll be making your videos more accessible. And accessibility is cool. Produced by Rooted in Rights. Hashtag access that. Alt text in a snap. Alt text is a written description of the image you post online. It helps everyone, including blind and low vision folks using screen readers, enjoy your visual content. On Facebook, use alt text by uploading an image through the website and clicking the edit photo icon in the corner of the thumbnail. Click the alt text icon on the left sidebar of the following window and write your description of the photo in the text field that appears. Then click Save. For Twitter, make sure you first turn on alt text by checking the Composed Image Descriptions box in the Accessibility tab on your settings page. Afterwards, simply click the Add Description footer at the bottom of your image's thumbnail and include your description at the bottom of the following screen. For Instagram, when creating a new post, tap Advanced Settings at the bottom of the window. Next, tap Write Alt Text beneath the Accessibility header and write your alt text, in this case, birthday cake with a yellow background and a lit candle in the shape of a number 1. Then click Done. Accessibility is cool. Produced by Rooted in Rights.
Hashtag WhyDescribe.
When people tell me that they don't have time to be accessible, that's a choice they're making, and in doing so, they're communicating who can take part in that discussion. My name is Cindy, and I'm a student at the University of Washington studying a subject called human-centered design. I'm in my late 20s, and I am a white woman who also identifies as blind and disabled. As far as social media goes, I use it a lot for personal social networking as well as professional networking. I use a series of gestures and keyboard commands that allow me to explore content non-visually.
Cindy swipes through an app on her phone.
So I've just gone through like 5 or 6 tweets in the same time. I feel like it took me to read a couple of tweets at human speed or slower. Our history is characterized by systematic isolation. People with disabilities have not been given the means to gather and organize except in the past few decades. And so for people with disabilities, social media is extremely liberating to help us connect with other people. Audio description and captioning can totally help us both prioritize and reimagine digital and visual media. We all need to take responsibility for making the world more accessible, and companies and agencies that already have power need to take the lead. It doesn't have to be bad. Like, consider it yourself lucky that you get to prioritize the important content. All of your viewers will appreciate it.
Produced by Rooted in Rights.
Hashtag access that. Transcripts in a snap. Think of a transcript as a text version of your video. When made correctly, video transcripts can be read by screen readers or turned into Braille documents, making your content accessible to people who are blind or low vision. If a video player doesn't support captions, a transcript can provide access for people who are deaf and hard of hearing. They're also helpful for people who want to quickly scan or search a video's content. So what's in a transcript? A basic transcript is just a written version of everything said in your video. It also indicates who says it and any relevant sounds. To make our transcripts more accessible, make sure to include any key visual information someone would need in order to understand what's going on, such as locations or important nonverbal communication. How else would someone relying on a transcript know that your characters were waving from a train? Many service providers will transcribe your video for you for less than $1 a minute, but if you've already done the work to caption your video on YouTube, producing a video transcript is a breeze. First, navigate to the video on YouTube and click the 3-dot icon just below the player in the bottom right. Select Open Transcript from the drop-down menu and a list of the video's captions will appear. Remove the timestamps by clicking on the 3-dot icon in the transcript toolbar and selecting Toggle Timestamps. Highlight all the text and copy and paste it into a document. Add in your important visual information where needed. You can group lines together by speaker if you like, but it won't make a difference for people needing to access your content using screen readers.
It's important to remember that not all documents with text are accessible. Most PDFs, for instance, flatten text into the document, making it invisible to assistive screen readers. So it's best to save your transcript as plain text in a file type like .doc, .txt, or HTML. After you saved your transcript, include a link to it in your share text or on your website. If you share your video on social media, paste the transcript text as the first comment on your post so that users don't have to click to another page to access it. Our goal here is accessibility, and accessibility is cool. Produced by Rooted in Rights.
#WhyDescribe. A woman signs to camera while an interpreter translates off screen.
Well, based on my experience looking at social media like Facebook and just what people use within the deafblind community, I would say is probably very varied. The transcript, though, is really necessary. I would say that's crucial for deafblind people. For example, videos now are becoming more and more challenging for me. I used to be able to watch them, see visually what was going on, maybe watch the interpreter, but I'm at the point now with my vision where it's just too stressful on my eyes to watch the actual video. So I'd rather just read the transcript or the text. So I would definitely strongly encourage the transcript.
Produced by Rooted in Rights.
#AccessThat. Captions in a snap. Captions provide a real-time, on-screen text version of everything spoken within a video, as well as any relevant sounds, music, or intonation. They help all sorts of viewers understand video content, whether you're deaf, hard of hearing, forgot your headphones, or just like to read along. To create captions for YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter videos, first upload your video to YouTube. Using the classic version of Creator Studio, locate the video you want to caption within the dashboard. Click the drop-down next to the video's Edit button and select Subtitles CC. While you can create your captions from scratch by clicking on the Add New Subtitles button, YouTube will usually publish a draft of your captions for you a short time after your video is uploaded. You can also get captions from a third party uploaded directly to your account for as little as $1 a minute. But while both options can be a great start, they usually need to be edited for accuracy. To make sure your captions are just right, click on a published version to pull up YouTube's caption editor. Click the Edit button in the top right of the page and use the caption blocks on the left to edit text and to add or remove captions. To change timing, drag the captions' start and end points on the timeline. Remember, in addition to what is spoken, captions need to include important sounds, inflections, and music. Also, it's best that captions are formatted correctly in order to easily distinguish sounds from speakers and speakers from one another. For an amazing guide on how to format your captions correctly, visit captioningkey.org. Once you've finished editing your YouTube captions, save changes. You can use your captions on Facebook and Twitter by simply downloading them as an SRT file in the Actions drop-down menu. You can upload that SRT file to your video in either platform. Accessibility is cool. Produced by Rooted in Rights. The words CityStream within a grid of images. Title: CityStream, the Braille Challenge. Children sit at desks with large metal devices, Braillers.
Look at this classroom. What do you see?
Typing in Braille.
Well, to answer that, consider what these students are able to see.
The image dims.
Did you finish the first passage?
Welcome to the 17th Annual Braille Challenge at the Washington Talking Book and Braille Library, where 9-year-old Zoe Newton's spelling skills are right on point.
Zoe.
Yeah, some words, and the 34th word was error.
Okay. How did you spell that out, or what was that like?
I spelt it correctly.
Using these Brailler machines, students are competing in 5 categories, ranging from spelling to reading comprehension.
3, 2, 1. Please stop what you're doing.
For these kids, from grade 1 to 12, it's a time to shine.
I finished 4.
In a setting that recognizes their skills, not the ever-present challenges in their lives.
Being a parent to a special needs or a disabled child, it's isolating.
Jeff Blank, Zoe's dad, says when a genetic bone disorder took away his daughter's sight just after she was born, he was anxious about developing her learning skills.
I remember going to visit some elementary schools and seeing Braille and how is this going to happen?
What word is this?
Let me see.
Seattle schools have helped Zoe learn to read. And with support from programs here at the Braille Library in South Lake Union, she's flourishing.
It's fun to be here.
Plus, families that may have felt alone dealing with blindness are able to come together.
There's a certain bonding and, oh, there are other people. So coming to an event like this, I feel it's great to meet age-appropriate kids who are in the same playing field. So it's great. Reading, spelling, comprehension are all things that we're working on at school. Why not make it a fun event with pizza?
But with the growth of assistive technologies like screen readers, more and more blind kids aren't learning Braille. And the experts say
their education is not complete.
The resources have completely changed.
Andrew Stauffer is a Braille teacher, serving as a judge for this competition.
This doesn't seem to match up.
A National Federation of the Blind study says only 10% of legally blind people in the U.S. read Braille.
People say, why do we need to have Braille? And Braille is really literacy.
Children using Braillers.
And while there are plenty of eager students here, research shows less than 9% of blind children are now learning Braille, down from about 50% in the 1950s. Stauffer says audiobooks do not teach sentence structure, punctuation, or spelling.
Opening quotes, capital, surely.
Critical language tools that sighted people take for granted.
I think that there's a lot of kids who are legally blind who can basically go through school and not learn Braille. There will be a point where they really just are not able to read books.
Library director Danielle Miller says it's a bigger problem than we might realize.
Stats for unemployment for people who are blind, they hover around about 75%, which is huge.
Miller hopes this competition can serve as not only a confidence booster for these kids, but a wake-up call to all of us that a community of disabled people who need our help are losing touch with an important skill.
If they can stick with their Braille, they'll be able to do anything. But there are a lot of kids out there who aren't getting their Braille for any number of reasons, and having Braille on the elevator buttons is not going to be enough.
A group of children take turns petting a cat.
So behind the excitement, including a visit with internet sensation Oscar the blind cat, there's a lesson to be learned here.
May I try to pet him?
Celebrating the successes of these contestants is very important.
It's fun to be here because I'm like learning and testing and reading comprehension Braille.
But the students who are not in these pictures, the ones who are not learning Braille, are the blind people whom we all truly need to see.
Because we want to make persons with disabilities be able to be included in society and have the same benefits and the same privileges as anybody else.
Zoe reading with her father.
Read.
That all may read.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact Northwest ADA Center at 800-949-4232 or visit nwadaCenter.org. Accessible Design and Innovative Inclusion at ccer.org/ADII. Web Accessibility Initiative at w3.org/WAI. National Federation of the Blind at 425-823-6380 or visit nfbw.org. The Washington Council of the Blind at 800-255-1147 or visit wcbinfo.org. Washington Talking Book and Braille Library at 800-542-0866 or visit wtbbl.org. The Arc King County at 206-364-6337 or visit arcofkingcounty.org.
Hi, my name is Noela Luka. I am a documentary filmmaker from Nairobi, Kenya.
And about 2 years ago, I came to the United States to study an MFA in documentary filmmaking. So about 7 months into the program, I woke up in what I later learned was a psychiatric unit. And upon discharge, I didn't know what that meant. So I chose to go back home to Kenya. And it's there that I was seeking for answers because my family was also asking, and my loved ones were also asking me, like, what happened? So when I discovered that what I had is a mental health illness, I realized that not so many people want to talk about it. And it was also really hard for me to get the help that I needed. And that also began my journey to finding out, how do I take care of myself? And in the process, I learned that there's so many other people who are going through what I'm going through. And as a filmmaker, I feel that it's important for people to have these kind of stories out there so that they can know where to get the right help. And right now, I'm part of a group in Kenya that is looking for inclusion for people with different mental health illnesses. Mental health is widely misunderstood. In the African context particularly, it is often perceived that based on the traditional context in Africa and in Kenya, it's often perceived that you are either a madman or that you have been bewitched. And through this storytelling platform, I'm hoping to demystify some of these misconceptions, just to show that people with mental health illnesses have a voice to their issues and that it gives it a human face.
Hi guys, my name is Emmanuel Mbuthia. I'm a 26-year-old photographer and artist from Kenya, and I'm also a mental health advocate. What pushed me to mental health advocacy is my lived experience with a mental illness. I experienced a lot of stigma and discrimination from friends, some peers at school, some of my family members also. What I would love to see is the conversation on mental health being an everyday thing, as opposed to being a one-day thing or a one-week thing. To bring about this change, I've come up with an online group, mainly on WhatsApp and Facebook, where young people share their stories about their lived experiences with mental illnesses. People ask questions about mental health issues, and we're able to answer these questions in a way that helps people understand what mental health is and what mental problems are. Because with this, people will be able to learn more about mental health, and this will help change their attitudes and perceptions towards mental health and the people who have mental health problems.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact National Alliance on Mental Illness Seattle at 800-562-2707 or visit disabilityrightswa.org. Crisis Connections at 866-427-4747 or visit crisisconnections.org.
Rooted in Rights presents Parenting Without Pity. Parenting Without Pity is a storytelling project where disabled parents draw from our own experience of disability to help non-disabled parents be better allies for their disabled children. Carrie, Seattle, Washington. A picture of Carrie with her husband and daughter.
If I would have had parents that really bought into or were aware of or fighting for championing disability rights, I think I would have dealt better with things like bullying and feeling socially excluded in schools. It would have taken me less time to realize that I could be a mom or a parent or be married. I didn't feel like my parents were open to any of that, so I sort of just got the message that I was supposed to be an academic machine, but there wasn't anything out. I was not going to have a life anywhere close to theirs. Now that I know what I do about disability and can see disability as a source of community and positive identity and not be sucked into the idea of being fixed or overcoming, I can have a hard time dealing with the grief experiences of non-disabled parents of kids with disabilities. And they may be in some of the same places that my parents were in terms of viewing disability. And that can mean that they're uncomfortable with disability, and therefore I feel like they're uncomfortable with me.
Krista, Toronto, Canada. A picture of Krista with her infant.
So when I lost my leg when I was 13, I had bone cancer, and the surgery was at that point, the cure for my cancer. I'd already had chemotherapy and radiotherapy, and so I'd already been in the hospital for about 2 years, in and out for treatment. And so when it came time that the resolution was going to be amputation, it was kind of normalized for me in a bit, in that I had made a number of friends who had also lost limbs, just other cancer kids. I also, had met a number of kids who had died. I knew that the fact that there was this option for me was lucky. I think at that age, the idea of disability community, I had no idea. I think that's only even recent years that I've actually really started to feel aware of and part of the disability community. And I think that's just been my own, there's a lot of different other communities. I'm an Indigenous person, I'm queer. I think my 20s were more politically about being active in those communities. And then in my 30s, it was more like, hey, what about disability? What are my politics about this? I was really lucky. My mom, she's a psychologist, and her specialty was working with adults with brain injury. So different, very different experiences, but she already was in a world where she was looking at adapting all the time and accessibility. What she could have added to that was actually giving me some space to also grieve, because I think with all of this sort of positivity and support, which I think was really great, I think I actually missed out a bit on having a chance to say, this kind of sucks.
Heather, Boston, Massachusetts. A picture of Heather with her daughter.
If I'm talking about disability in terms of being a Black disabled woman, I know automatically that a lot of us have a harder time self-identifying as being disabled, because in our minds, that is just so layered because of family, maybe stigma, culture, religion. Those are just some of the things that might impact coming out and saying we actually have a disability. My parents weren't really connected to any sort of support groups or, just other disabled parents and kids. That came, much later. And I think for me, that would have been really something that would have been so beneficial in many ways, in terms of self-awareness and sort of providing a mirror to seeing other people, other folks like myself of color who are both Black and disabled.
Julie, Fayetteville, Arkansas. A picture of Julie with her husband and 2 sons.
I think people are too quick to put a label on kids, I mean, my husband says if they did that back in his time, they probably would have labeled him, I mean, they didn't do it so quick because I feel like it's easier to put a label on kids than to be patient and help the kid.
Sheila, Bremerton, Washington. A picture of Sheila with her 2 sons and husband.
We have to have conversations we're not having. As parents, regardless of whether we have disabilities, we have to change that culture for our kids. There's still this gigantic culture of shame and embarrassment around disability. We need to make that go away. We need to make it that this is who we are, this is okay, how we function is okay, that your wrist is bent and you can't get anything into it or out of it is okay. That's fine. There's no shame in that. That's just who you are.
Debra, Seattle, Washington. A picture of Debra with her son and daughter. She signs to camera while a person beside her translates.
My parents, later in life, admitted that they wished they had learned sign much sooner. Now, of course, I could speak somewhat and lip read to some extent, but now with the vision loss that I have, And not having seen my family that often, when I do visit, it's much more difficult for me to lip read my brothers, for example. My mother has since passed away, but my father and my older brothers have often said they feel like they wish they had learned sign so that we could have all participated equally in the family interactions. Mind you, me and my brothers who were deafblind, when we all learned sign, we were able to communicate with each other. So we had a lot of interaction. But I find that a lot of deafblind friends who have siblings that are all sighted and hearing and don't learn sign, those deafblind individuals feel very isolated in their families. And now I meet parents who have deafblind children, and they ask me, what is the biggest challenge and what should they do? And I encourage them to find a way to communicate with their family.
Stephen, Bristol, Pennsylvania. A picture of Stephen with his infant and wife.
I think from the day I became deaf, every day after that was better than any day before. My life has only gotten better, except that I lost all of my friends and family. You know, so I still go I go visit my mother, go visit my father, and we sit there and we read, or they might write me a little note, but there's no real communication happening. Well, what I would love parents to know is, first of all, is you need to talk about it. Is you can't be afraid to name it. It's not, and that goes with any disability. Is, you know, I think a lot. I think right in the beginning, it's easy to try and resist it, to deny its existence, to attribute it to something else. The most important thing for parents to truly understand disability is to have continuous positive exposure to disabled people. You know, I think projects like this, like the constant exposure to disability in meaningful ways can go a long way.
Keith, Fontana, California. A photo of Keith.
It's okay to mourn the loss of the imaginary child, because for all of this time you built up that child, you had all these visions, these dreams. Understand that, deal with it, but celebrate the child that you have in all their beauty and all their complexity, because you're not raising autism, you're not raising cerebral palsy, you're not raising low vision, you're not raising mental health, you're raising Jamal. You're raising John, you're raising Karen, you're raising Susan, you're raising Raheem. And once you get to that part, then everything else just becomes mechanical. And my mother didn't raise a disability. She was raising a black man in America who was born at the end of the 60s and the 70s, who just so happens to be America's worst nightmare because he's a black man, you know, So I tell all parents, particularly black parents, is that the data is stark. 7 out of 10 individuals who have violent incidences with the police who end up dead or seriously injured are people of color with disabilities. When people of color with disabilities, you know, who is the largest kid, if your kid has a hidden disability and has an emotional outburst, suspensions, self-segregation or substantial segregation, like there are real world consequences to you not giving your kid the tools to understand where they are in America.
To learn more and to share your story, visit rootedinrights.org/parents.
The words CityStream within a grid of images. Title: CityStream, Seattle Slam Wheelchair Rugby. Athletes in modified and reinforced metal wheelchairs maneuver around each other on an indoor basketball court as spectators watch on. One holds a ball in his lap. Cut to players slamming their rugby wheelchairs into their opponents. A player is hit head-on.
Yeah, the hits are a lot of fun.
Multiple players collide.
Some of them hurt.
Dorian Taylor from the Seattle Slam.
Yeah, it's full contact sports, so things happen. You know, you get smacked sometimes.
The team is the Seattle Slam.
The team cheers in a huddle.
And the game is wheelchair rugby.
Follow me. Let's go to work.
Using a standard basketball court with 4 players, male or female, on either side.
Wagner, I want you at 12.
The idea is to get across the end line carrying a volleyball. Hopefully, with most of your teeth.
A player's wheel is replaced.
We'll end up getting a
stress fractures on our rugby chairs, on the joints, just from the continual pounding.
It went pretty good. I got decked in the eye.
Chairs meet head on.
Sometimes you get hit and it's kind of like a gut punch.
I can feel it in my side sometimes. I don't have feeling, but some hits I've taken.
A hard crash.
I can feel them.
These athletes are quadriplegic, which might not mean what you think it means.
A quadriplegic is just somebody that's got impairment in all 4 limbs.
Players are classified according to the functional level of their limbs. 0.5 the lowest to 3.5 the highest. And you can't have more than 8 points on the court for a team at any time.
Now we're running 5.5 points against 8-point lineup, so that's not bad.
And the hits aren't just for fun. They're an important part of ball control and strategy.
A player pushes another backwards in his chair.
This game is really about forcing the other team to make mistakes.
Dorian cruises past the goal line with the ball. Next, Brian Callanan from the Seattle Channel demonstrates.
All right, so the way wheelchair rugby works is this. You've got your low point guys out here. They're kind of like the offensive linemen on a football field. Then you've got your high point guys rolling through here to try to cross the goal line. Players say it's a lot like chess. There's just a lot more contact.
Back up, back up.
The Seattle Slam is one of the top-ranked wheelchair rugby teams in the country.
The Seattle Slam competes at a match.
But this tournament ended with a tough loss to the Portland Pounders.
1, 2, 3, Pounders! Let's line up, let's go. Let's go.
For the Slam, it's time to go back to work on a sport that's a lot more than just a game.
The Slam and the Pounders high-five one another. Next, a photo of a dirt bike rider in midair. Jeremy Hannaford of the Slam.
I was a motocross racer. I was at an indoor track in Renton and got a bad buck off of a jump, landed on my head and broke my neck. So.
A photo of Jeremy in a neck brace, asleep in a hospital bed.
It was wild. It was like being a baby again, you know? I couldn't do anything for myself. I couldn't feed myself, couldn't dress myself. I was dependent on everybody. And ended up having to move home and just start everything over again.
2 people transfer Jeremy into his rugby chair at the edge of the court.
Jeremy Hannaford coaches.
I'm gonna go in there, turn around, dump that ball to me.
And plays for the Slam with equal intensity.
Players zoom around the court.
Turn that way, turn that way.
He says his teammates are his brothers and sisters who've helped him build a life.
You know, you first come here and you think it's just sports, you know, and then you get to talking to other guys that are in the same situation, and then you start talking about, you know, have you ever traveled somewhere? How do you brush your teeth, you know? How do you throw your socks on? You know, it's just the simple things that most people take for granted.
The Seattle Slam competes at a match. Players bang into one another and pass the ball.
I've done so much more since I got hurt than I ever did before I got hurt, you know? I've traveled all over the country, different countries. Met some of the coolest people I've ever met in my life, so just there's so much more to it than just the sport.
It's a concept he wants people with and without disabilities to understand.
What we try to do here is, even if you can't play our sport, we'll invite you to come out and get in a chair and practice with us and try it out, you know?
That's right. Come strap into a chair at the Southwest Community Center in West Seattle.
Jeremy instructs a young group in rugby chairs.
Like 12-year-old D'Amico and his friends did.
D'Amico scoots around with the ball. He wheels towards the goal.
Past the heavy breathing, you won't be able to keep a smile off your face either.
A smiling D'Amico scores.
And you might just learn something too.
D'Amico.
When you do it, it's like you feel what they feel.
Tony, who's 13.
I have a whole bunch of respect for them because they lost their legs and like they're still like active.
13-year-old Caden Morey.
Some people don't think that they can play sports because they're disabled, but it don't matter.
Point made, says player Brian Moore.
At the end of the day, there's a lot more than any 2 people on the planet have in common, right, than we do that's separating us. And it's easy to just see those things, those little tiny differences that make me think, oh, this person's unapproachable, or they have something that I can't relate to. But the reality is, it's a small part of who I am, who everybody else is out here. It's just it's a little piece of life.
A player transfers into a rugby chair.
You might not know, more than 930,000 people in our state have a disability, and more than half are in between 21 and 64 years of age.
All right, guys, let's go to work.
But you should know there's a team of athletes out there with a strong message. They should never be overlooked.
Players dash around the court, passing the ball back and forth and colliding with their opponents. A Slam member gets ready to block, another smiles. Various teams competing as players handle, pass, and swat the ball amidst darting chairs and sudden collisions. A Seattle Slam member scores.
It's life-changing, you know? You take a really bad situation and turn it into something that you never thought you could have, so. Now that sports and TV and all that is coming out where they're, focusing on disabilities, you see that people with disabilities are just people. They're just in a different situation, We're just doing it in a different way.
A group photo of the Seattle Slam Wheelchair Rugby team with multiple trophies. Credits appear. Producer-reporter Brian Callanan. Photographer Philip Townsend, Chelsea Shepard. Editor Ian Devier.
Watch CityStream Thursday nights at 7 on the Seattle Channel. Or get video on demand and podcasts anytime at seattlechannel.org.
A wintry message from some neighbors with disabilities.
4 days.
7 days.
3 weeks. That's how long it was before I could leave my house after it snowed last winter. When it snows, property owners are responsible for shoveling the sidewalks in front of our homes and businesses.
My name is Bruce. I live in Columbia City, and I'm deafblind.
Laura in her power wheelchair.
My name is Laura, and I live in Lake City.
Neve in their power wheelchair.
I'm Neve, and I live in Hillman City.
The thing I love about my neighborhood is that it has libraries, it has grocery stores, restaurants, places I can meet my friends, all of which I can reach in my wheelchair. This all changed when the snowstorm happened last year, and I was trapped in my home for a whole week.
When the snow builds up, my cane has no orientation. I can't feel the ground. Everyone uses sidewalks to get around. But for people with disabilities, they're crucial. If they aren't cleared, we're stuck.
If you got caught off guard without a shovel or salt last year, buy your supplies now.
Talk to your neighbors to come up with a plan to ensure that all the sidewalks in front of your block stay clear.
Find people in your neighborhood who might need help. And if you can't shovel your sidewalk yourself, make sure to find help before it snows.
Paths need to be cleared within 12 hours of snow falling and should be 36 inches wide to make sure that all of us, including those of us who use wheelchairs, can get through safely.
Heavy snow isn't common for Seattle, but due to the climate crisis and changing weather patterns, we need to be prepared.
So get out there, get your shovel and salt, and check in with your neighbors.
We all rely on sidewalks to get where we need to go.
And our communities rely on all of us to do our part.
For more information, go to takewinterbystorm.org. Produced by Rooted in Rights and Seattle Department of Transportation.
Hi, I'm Vanessa.
I'm Clark.
We both live in Seattle.
We both use wheelchairs.
And we're both tired of these cars blocking the intersections.
Clark and Vanessa attempt to cross the street, but a van blocks the crosswalk. Then they navigate around a huge charter bus blocking the crosswalk. Next, they attempt to weave through several cars blocking an intersection.
Seriously?
I don't know.
Try not to die, please.
For pedestrians who can't step up onto the sidewalk, blocking a curb ramp means we have to ride in the street through traffic just to get out of the intersection. Like, the reality is when you block the box, you block us out.
It's our access and it's our safety.
Better enforcement at intersections will make our streets safer for everyone. A message from Rooted in Rights and Transportation Choices Coalition, Transit for All.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you today. My name is Karen Braitmayer. I'm an architect and accessibility consultant working for Studio Pacifica in Seattle. How can we best design and create environments, products, and technology that serve the most people of all ages, abilities, and sense acuity? I'm going to show you some pictures of 3 products, and I'm going to describe them so everyone can understand the images. There are 3 products shown on this page. On the left is a large piece of fitness equipment with a tower and some arms that extend to either side and lots of weights and pulleys. In the middle is a seat. What makes this fitness machine versatile is that the seat folds away and a wheelchair user could back in and use the pulleys and weights in the same way as if someone sat on the seat. On the right is a watch. It's a silver metal color, and it has a dial. But instead of hands pointing to the marks on the dial, a small ball rolls on a circular track in the center, and another one rolls on the outside edge to tell the hours and minutes. This watch allows someone to tell time by both looking and feeling the watch. Multisensory information. A third product in the lower right is a pill bottle, like you might receive from the pharmacy. This has a colored ring on the cap that's changeable, and the printing on the label is larger and organized with the most important information prominently displayed. This was designed to make it easier for folks to read and keep track of their medications. The designers of these products all used the concept of universal design to make their products better for everyone. Brilliant, yes? So what is universal design? In the late 1990s, Ron Mace, a U.S. architect, led a team of 10 architects, product designers, engineers, and researchers to collaborate and draft the 7 basic principles of universal design. The goal of UD was defined as the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for specialized or design or adaptation. The 7 principles provide a framework for evaluating designs, guiding a design process, and educating both designers and consumers on what makes products and environments usable. Consider the average bell curve of ability. Humans start out as babies needing support. Then, as you get older, maybe into your mid-30s, you're at your peak, and then naturally your abilities might wane as you age. Designers tend to use the top of the bell curve as the basis for their design, so the needs of people on either side of that curve are typically overlooked. Universal design aims to change that perspective on design. The 7 principles of universal design are: 1. Equitable use. 2. Flexibility in use. 3. Simple and intuitive use. 4. Perceptible information. 5. Tolerance for error. 6. Low physical effort. And 7. Size and space for approach and use. These 7 principles may seem abstract, but let's compare them to real-life examples. Principle 1, equitable use. The design is useful and marketable to people with diverse abilities. Let's look at some pictures. The left-hand image here is of a man riding in a wheelchair, rolling into a building with automatic sliding doors, the kind that are activated by the motion of someone moving towards it. These are the easiest and most usable doors for everybody. The right-hand image here shows a pair of doors with push buttons on the wall to the right. There is one set about waist height and one down at the height of someone's toes when seated in a wheelchair. There's an inset picture of my toes approaching the push button. If you don't have arm or hand strength, you could just bump the button with a part of your wheelchair. This next image is of a remote control for a television set. This control has buttons that are raised so you can feel them, colored buttons for specific features, and voice activation. All features that increase the usability of this device for everybody. Principle number 2, flexibility in use. The design accommodates a wide range of individual preferences and abilities. This photo illustrates chairs in an auditorium. One chair is a standard width, and the other chair is a bit wider. This allows folks of different sizes to find comfortable options for seating. And then this next photo is a favorite new product of mine. I call it an extension cord on a stick. The image shows a double-sided outlet on a post about 36 inches high. This product allows power plugs to be within reach to seated users who can't reach floor or low wall outlets. And it's really great because it's both mobile and reachable. Principle number 3, simple and intuitive use. The use of the design is easy to understand regardless of the user's experience, knowledge, language skills, or current concentration level. This image shows a smartphone screen with a high contrast lettering and easy to understand organization of a contact name and phone number. It's a great example of how to make a device simple and intuitive. Think about how many small children are able to use a tablet or a smartphone device these days. And then, of course, there's so many devices that are triggered through voice activation. Again, very accessible to everybody. It isn't just technology that should be simple and intuitive, but our building products as well. This photo shows a door handle that's a bent metal shape, which allows for someone with low dexterity or grip to pull the door open and slide the lock closed or open again using only a fist or wrist. This slide illustrates a clever elevator layout at Access Living, an independent living center in Chicago. This elevator layout allows for pass-through use. A wheelchair user doesn't need to try to turn around in the elevator since the doors open at both ends of the elevator on every floor. And the floor call buttons inside the elevator are large and easy to hit for those with low dexterity and have the full name of the floor in high contrast text on each button. Principle 4, perceptible information. The design communicates necessary information effectively to the user, regardless of the ambient conditions or the user's sensory abilities. This photo was taken at a condiment stand at a food court. The 3 cans on a counter in this photo each hold disposable silverware. In front of each can is a label with white raised text on a black background and Braille below, reading stir sticks, fork, and spoon. Everything that communicates information should do it in all formats, tactile, visual, and audible. These 2 images of an interpretive display from the understory here in Seattle illustrates how one exhibit can provide information in multiple formats, illustrating tactile information by showing a model of the Amazon sphere that has parts that come on and off in the image in the right, and the printed displays in the image in the left show large text, high color contrast, another touchable scale model, and multiple placement, high and low, of descriptive text, so all users can participate. Principle 5, tolerance for error. The design minimizes hazards and the adverse consequences of accidental or unintended actions. These images of household items that have become ubiquitous are great examples of UD. The paddle handle light switch that you can touch with a hand or an elbow to turn the lights on and off on the left, and the lever door handle on the right, also usable with a hand, a fist, or an elbow to open. Principle 6, low physical effort. The design can be used efficiently and comfortably and with a minimum of fatigue. Millennium Park in Chicago is a strong example of using universal design in the building of places and spaces. In this illustration on the left, the photo shows a long walkway with greenery on each side, and at the end of that concrete walk is a staircase rising up. The right-hand photo illustrates the sloped path that connects the bottom of that stair with the top of the stair, a switchback ramp, if you will, sloping up gently towards us in the picture, turning at a level landing, and then sloping again up and away from the photographer. Each side of this sloped walkway are planting strips bordered by stone walls, the right size to be a seat, So if someone needs to take a rest, it's an easy place to sit down. Speaking of seats, the metal benches placed around Millennium Park are great examples of universal design. They have both backs and arms, making it easier for folks to push up to a rise to stand. Principle 7, size and space for approach and use. Appropriate size and space is provided for approach, reach, manipulation, and use, regardless of a user's body size, posture, or mobility. This next image is of a sink in a public toilet room. It might look pretty average to you. It does have knee space below the sink for wheelchair users to approach. But check out the faucet location. The faucet at the left of the picture is at the end of the sink, much closer to the leading edge, and therefore works really well for people of limited reach or short stature or children. Universal homes, like universal products, aim to work for people at all phases of their lives. My home is wheelchair friendly, which means we have no stairs, wide hallways, few doorways, and a level entry into the shower. When my husband had a knee replacement a while back, the physical therapist was able to send him home with little other than crutches because he was able to function so easily in our no-step home. It may be hard to imagine now, but at any time, you might experience an injury or illness that causes temporary or permanent limits to ability or agility. Universal design makes your home flexible. Concrete Change is an organization in Atlanta, Georgia, advocating for whole neighborhoods to be built with visitability as a core design feature of these private homes. Founder Eleanor Smith is said to have thought, if we can have a lift on every new city bus, why not a zero-step entry on every new house? Visitable homes have at least one zero-step entry, wide doorways throughout, and a toilet room that is usable on the main floor. The concept is intended to allow everyone to feel comfortable coming to visit. If your grandparent, for example, uses a mobility aid, they may shy away from visiting if they're worried about getting up the steps to the front door, or if they have concerns about needing to use the bathroom while visiting. Visitable homes eliminate those barriers. I visited a neighborhood built on visitable principles a few years ago. As my group wandered down the street, a homeowner came out to her fence at the sidewalk and asked what we were doing hanging around. When she heard our purpose, to see examples of visitability, she shared that she and her husband had purchased their first home in this neighborhood because they just liked the house, not thinking at all about visitability. Not long after that, they had their first twin sons. One of the twins was born with a mobility disability. They became terribly grateful they had chosen this home because now he could visit all the neighborhood kids due to the no-step entries. As the mom of a wheelchair user in hilly Seattle, where we can't visit the majority of our friends due to steps, I understood the power of inclusion that this family was experiencing. Of course, not all disabilities are obvious and mobility related. Sensory, such as hearing or vision, neurodivergence, everything from autism to dyslexia, and communication disabilities all benefit from universal design solutions. Some people argue that disability is really just the mismatch between our environment and our abilities. What if the world was predominantly elevators, and you had to search around the back of the building for stairs, rather than the stairs being a primary design feature in offices or hotels? So, at some point in our lives, we will all fit the definition of disabled, whether we self-identify or not. We all benefit from the features that make life easier for people with disabilities. Think of how ubiquitous the curb ramp or lever door handle are. And of course, texting, which was developed to accommodate the deaf community, is now something we can't live without. Other technologies that help everyone, not just people with disabilities, are audiobooks, large print, captioning, video conferencing, voice recognition, voice control, home automation, GPS, robots. Derek Featherstone makes an interesting point in his recent article entitled, How We Do Our Work Matters, Accessibility and Inclusion. He states that some people use accessibility and inclusion as interchangeable terms. He argues that they are not interchangeable. Accessibility is an outcome, and inclusive, read universal design, is a process. Accessibility is measured against a criteria that is outlined in a code or standard. He goes on to say that without the involvement of those with life experience of disability, designs may or may not meet the goal of accessible. In contrast, inclusive or universal design is in part defined by the method used to achieve the final design. If people with disabilities are included, the process and the end result are inclusive. Thank you.
The words CityStream within a grid of images. Title, CityStream, aging in place. A man maneuvers his wheelchair through a kitchen. A woman follows.
If you get the plums out.
I will get the plums out.
Leslie Haynes and Randy Earl work well together in the kitchen.
No, you go ahead.
Okay.
This couple is able to do that because their kitchen and the rest of their Pioneer Square home works for them.
Randy at the sink in his wheelchair.
Randy has a genetic defect that affects his spinal cord, known as AMN.
It's called adrenomyeloneuropathy.
Can you spell that, please?
I know, it's A-D-R-E. Ah, there you go.
He's able to smile about dealing with a disability that keeps him in a wheelchair. But his search 13 years ago with Leslie for an accessible home to live in was no joke.
Leslie.
And so I just got mad and I said, you know, we're gonna create our own place.
Randy and Leslie's home being renovated.
They've done just that through the use of universal design principles in a 900-plus square foot home set up not just for Randy, but for any person, young or old, with mobility issues.
And can work for anyone, really, not just, you know, moms and strollers, just for everyone. So that was really important for us.
A housing and urban development study shows less than 1% of homes in the U.S. are wheelchair accessible. A fact Randy says speaks to our country's focus on youth.
As a culture, you know, we don't value older people as much, and this idea of getting, you know, older and needing adaptations, it's hard for people.
Universal design is not a widely known term.
That's Carly Hokie of C. Hokie Design, who's well aware that our region will soon have a population where 1 out of 4 people is age 60 or older.
Carly in a bathroom fixture showroom.
Space of 36 inches.
Carly helps remodel homes you can live in longer, what advocates call aging in place.
How do you get into the shower?
From simple changes to improve bathroom access, to making kitchen utilities easier to reach. Carly says improving your home's accessibility is a smart and relatively inexpensive investment in a fast-growing real estate market.
So that's why it's important. It's because people want choice, so they're starting to demand and ask for ways, how do I stay at home longer and live functionally and safely?
Marketplace Sotheby's realtor Barry Long, in a wheelchair since 1991 after a motorcycle crash, has pushed the conversation about accessible homes even further.
It's a matter of if it's got accessibility features in the home, can you get to them?
Barry, with John L. Scott realtor Tom Minty and the Northwest Multiple Listing Service, put Washington on the map as the first state to display accessibility features on its home listings.
You can search by any of these or all of these, and you can search.
10 different buttons now allow you to see how accessible a home's entry is, or its kitchen, or bathroom, for example.
This really does add value to a home.
Creating these kinds of listings is one of many priorities for the Seattle-King County Advisory Council on Aging and Disability Services. And Barry says more breakthroughs are to come.
What we're doing with this technology is now allowing people to truly go find homes that are accessible or adaptable, that then they can easily make accessible for them to stay in as long as possible.
That's the goal with this project at Randy and Leslie's place, where contractor Thomas Jacobson is remodeling the bathroom. New fixtures here have added 6 inches of space Randy needs as his overall mobility continues to deteriorate.
The fulfillment that I got out of it was probably greater than the majority of the projects that we do, because it required me to get in and really understand what it was that somebody needed.
And as architect Carol Sundstrom puts it, universal design is something we all need.
It's so effortless that you don't even realize when a space is universally designed because it just works better for everyone.
And that's if we're aging in place, dealing with accessibility, or just creating a home that people with mobility issues would feel comfortable visiting.
All these things we need to think about so that it's not just one formula for living.
A pull-out faucet.
This just lets me do multiple things.
Randy and Leslie hope more people catch on to the need for more accessible homes. And they're grateful their latest renovation is finally done.
Just trying to make it work for a lot of different people.
And there's your keys. This is going to be our forever home. This is going to be our forever neighborhood. And that's how we have approached our lives here.
Leslie kisses Randy on the cheek as he pushes out their front door. Credits appear: producer-reporter Brian Callanan and Susan Hahn, videographers, editor Dave Coe, Valerie Vaza, and Philip Townsend.
Watch CityStream Thursday nights at 7 on the Seattle Channel, or get video on demand and podcast anytime at seattlechannel.org.
To learn more about the topics covered in the preceding program, contact Universal Design Council at environmentsforall.org, Washington Assistive Technology Act program, at 800-214-8731, or visit watap.org. Washington State Independent Living Council at 800-624-4105, or visit wasilc.org. Aging and Disability Services at 206-684-0660, or visit agingkingcounty.org.